run it again. Got a lane. Kicked in the turbo. Middle road. Goodbye. Touchdown, Bama.
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast.
Sounds good.
All right, good evening, everyone. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing the Natty podcast. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Sunday night here. My deepest apologies to everyone in the chat waiting on us tonight. Just had some technical snafus that we had to work through, but we are all good to go. We are here and ready to draft another college fantasy full FBS 30-round mock draft tonight. And tonight I have joining me from Fantasy and Frames, Dynasty Pros, Fantrax. This dude is all over the place when it comes to fantasy football content creation. He is JT Brew. JT, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Excited to do some drafting. I've been in a bunch of CFF and CTC drafts this summer, so I'm getting pumped for college football season, man. It's so many more people getting into the space, and I love it. It's something I love. I grew up loving college football. It was like my number one until I got older and I got more into the NFL. So I'm pumped to get more back into it. You know, with Fantrax and other sites actually, you know, being able to get on there and actually do college fantasy. I absolutely love it. So I got really big into it maybe just a couple years ago. And then I did my first CFF league with you last year.
Yes, sir.
As part of your one of your early for the newbies because I had never done C2. I had never done CFF. I had done C2C. So I'm pumped to do both. I'm getting into as many leagues as I can this summer.
Yeah, that reminds me, I need to set up another one of those redshirt leagues for this year. For those of you who maybe are listening to this right now or watching this later, every year I create a CFF league that is solely dedicated to first-time CFF players. Now, that doesn't mean you've never played C2C or Devy before. Like, I'm not going for like totally people who are completely new to college football or anything like that. But it is a place for people who have not played the game before to compete against other people on a similar experience and skill level there, right? That way you're not jumping into a league with a bunch of people who've been playing for 10 years and you just feel out of your depth. It's a great way to get into the game. So I'll probably have that set up here within the next couple of weeks. But like I said before, I'm going to go ahead and throw up the draft stream here. We'll have the draft starting here at 8:20. But for right now, we can try to touch on some of the things that you guys are chatting about in the chat. I see a lot of people kind of talking about, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. A lot of people are kind of touching on with his transfer to Arizona. So JT, what are your kind of thoughts on that transfer right there?
Yeah, right now it's interesting to see kind of where these guys are going. With the spring portal, it's like these guys transfer in and you think, okay, they're locked in. And then sometimes either they don't get what they think they're going to get as far as like playing time, or maybe the coaches, coaches are always trying to recruit players no matter what. They want as many guys as they can get. But sometimes you get guys in and they maybe just don't fit the way you think they're going to fit. Mm-hmm. And so then those guys kind of move on. So it's just kind of a new world out there with all this transfers and the way it works now. So I've had to adjust, you always think, hey, I'm going to take that handcuff. I'm going to do this.
Yep.
That's not the way it works anymore. These younger guys, sometimes you got to look at it and you got to be like, okay, I want to take talent. Is this guy who's maybe the 4th-string guy at Ohio State, is he actually going to be at Ohio State in 3 years? Or is that guy going to be on another team? So I've had to reevaluate like where I'm taking guys and say, okay, hey, is this guy getting playing time now? No, but that doesn't mean he doesn't end up on another team where he's the clear-cut starter next year. So I think it's just the way you have to look at it is slightly different than it was in the past.
Oh, for sure, right? And this is something that Nate Marquise and I have been discussing heavily on our Dynasty monthly podcast all season long about how much the transfer portal just has to force you to change the way you think about it. Things are just more short-term now. In terms of like projecting to the future than we've really seen before in the past, because of the fact that you might find a true freshman at a G5 school that just absolutely kills it in year one. You're sitting in 5-10 years ago, you'd be sitting there thinking, oh my God, I got this dude for like the next 3 years playing in the G5. He's clearly above his competition level here. This is going to be great. Nope, he could be out of there after year one, and he could be suddenly the second or third string at Alabama or Michigan or Ohio State or something like that. And all of a sudden, that value you thought you had is just gone. Krosky Merritt's kind of interesting to me as well, because it really kind of teaches, or is a good example of showing, like, during the offseason, you got to be on your toes with a lot of these players, right? Just because somebody announces that they're transferring somewhere does not mean that's actually going to happen. And it's not just the case of like, oh, he changed his mind after the spring because he didn't like it in the spring. No, Krosky Merritt, I truly believe, wanted to go to Ole Miss, but it seems like there was legitimate like transfer struggles there in terms of like academics that wouldn't let him translate to Ole Miss. And so therefore that's why he had to go back to Arizona, because if people remember, he was originally going to go to Arizona, then all of a sudden he flips to Ole Miss, and then there was the issues of him transferring, and then he went back to Arizona. So it's kind of an interesting one to watch. It sounds like he might be the RB1 at Arizona. It's kind of hard we're getting a lot of information out of Arizona, but nothing super concrete at the moment. Let's see. Oh, I see you in the chat there, JT. Very nice.
Well, I'm jumping in there talking to everybody. I think about Zachariah Franklin last year. From UTSA, thinking like, okay, he's going to move up he moved up to Ole Miss. I mean, if you were a CFF guy, man, you loved him. I mean, he absolutely crushed at UTSA. I had him on a bunch of C2C leagues, and I'm like loving it. So when he decided he was going to go to Ole Miss, I'm like, ooh, is this going to be a good thing or a bad thing? Good thing in that he probably helps your NFL prospects if he kills it there, and it helps any Debbie shares, that kind of stuff. But you're like, is it going to hurt his CFF production? And then he turns around and basically can't find the lineup, whether it was a personal thing, whether the coaches, he just didn't work with their system. He just never got in. And so all of a sudden you see him this year going to Illinois, which I think he actually could be very productive at Illinois. He could easily be their 1 or 2 there. So that's a guy, it's like, you just never know. It's like UTEP didn't work out. Ole Miss seemed like it could be great if he actually would have hit at Ole Miss. You're like, oh, this is even better. But those guys then miss sometimes. And so it's, moving up isn't always the best thing in fantasy or in real life.
Yeah, Franklin's definitely had his own struggles that he had to work with. But to your point about him going to Illinois, he's actually joining one of his old offensive coordinators that was at UTSA. So there's another point in his favor of he could probably easily walk in there day one knowing the system pretty well and quickly get onto the field there. So
yeah, somebody that lives 10 minutes from the University of Illinois, and I'm immersed in Illini stuff all the time. When I saw that he was interested in Illini, I texted all my Illinois friends, and I'm like, dude, this would be a huge get. I'm like, they got their old offensive.
Hey, sorry about that. I lost connection there for a second. I think we're back up and running. I hope everybody out there was able to get your discussion there on Zachariah Franklin at Illinois, but can you go back just a little bit and discuss it again? Because I think we cut out for about 30 seconds there.
When I found out he was maybe going to Illinois, I told all my friends that are Illini fans, I was like, hey, man, he would be a great fit here. Their old offensive coordinator from UTSA is at Illinois. He knows how to use Franklin. He knows how to utilize him the best way possible. So I was like, this is a great fit for Franklin and for Illinois, and he should slide right in there next to Pat Bryant and Elzy as the top 3 wide receivers on this team, which you'd hope is a little bit more improved. I mean, they got Altmaier, another Ole Miss guy that transferred out. First year starting last year, had some ups and downs for the Illini as a starting QB. But he's a guy I'm taking deep in leagues. Mm-hmm. I just think he's going to improve this year. I think they're going to throw a little bit more. We can talk as we get drafted. We'll talk about some of these other Illini guys, but I really like Franklin fitting in there for Illinois.
No, absolutely. I'm definitely excited about that. Real quick, a couple of things here. One, we got a great turnout here tonight, y'all. Really appreciate all of you guys. If you have not already won, hit that like button. Helps us out a ton. Gets us in front of a bunch of eyeballs of people who would be interested in this kind of content. Because not only are we talking college fantasy tonight, but we just talk college football in general. We love the game. And so just invite your CFP buddies, get them introduced to the game here. The draft is here. It'll provide a lot of great content for us to discuss different players throughout the time here. But if you've got friends who want to come in here and hang out with us and just talk college football, we're down to do that here as well. Again, we got a bunch of likes coming in already. Y'all, if we can get to 25 likes by the time that we hit let's just say the 10th round, 25 likes by the time we hit the 10th round, I would be very, very happy with y'all tonight. That would be just absolutely make my day. A couple of other comments here in the chat. Looks like our draft has actually started here, so actually we'll comment on that real quick. JT, you're at the 1-4 there. I will say 1-4 is typically where I see a lot of Tech McMillan come off in the past, but obviously the recent reports out of Arizona are not the most exciting when it comes to Tech McMillan, right? It sounds like that there is a possibility he's going to miss some time with that injury. So with him not on the board, you're now on the clock. Who are you looking at here?
So I would have been taking Luther Burden. Luther Burden's my guy. I'm a Mizzou guy, for anybody knows. Graduated from Mizzou. Huge Burden guy. I've taken him 1-1 basically everywhere I can. I tried to get him 1-2, and it was, people sniped him on me, so I went McMillan. McMillan would usually be my pick here. If it wasn't for everything that's kind of getting talked up, I usually like to tend to kind of wait on QB, but I think with McMillan being gone and with Burden getting taken, I'm going to go with Salter. To me, he's just I just feel like he's going to be a guy that Liberty has a pretty soft schedule, and he was great last year. I think Salter's going to just be added to that mix this year. I think he's going to be even better. So he's a guy I don't usually like to go QB super early, but he's a guy that I think is worth it.
I agree. I'd say there's probably two guys really in the first round that are absolutely worth it. We'll see if everybody else is kind to me here and lets me have let me have the other guy here. We'll see. We've got a lot of chats all of a sudden in the chat here, or a lot of questions here in the chat here. Again, out of Rhythm Fantasy Sports says something to think about. Are these G5 players? Will they create the same type of fantasy production on the Power 4 teams? I mean, I've been very vocal in the past that anybody who transfers up from Power 4 or from G5 up to Power 4 has to get some kind of knockdown in their fantasy value. T. Johnson says, okay, so Jared, are you still on the Juice Wells train more than the Trey Harris one? That is a misrepresentation of my stance. I still think Trey Harris will be the number one wide receiver for Ole Miss this year. I just don't think that he'll be somebody that you can rely on fantasy-wise. He'll have his big games, but you're not going to want to play him week to week to week because of just the up and down nature. I mean, just look at his production last year, right? You could never predict when he was going to go off. So, no, I'm not. Juice Wells greater than Trey Harris. The only thing I would say is that Juice Wells will impact Trey Harris enough to keep him from being a fantasy relevant guy. Ted McMillan off there at the 1-8. He was one of the guys, obviously, given everything going on. I was curious to see how far he would fall in this draft. Looks like there he is at 1-8. So looks like he's not fallen too far. But I wonder if we got confirmation today, JT, that Ted McMillan would be out for, let's just say, 2 games. How far would he drop in your rankings?
I mean, for me, in 2 games, if I'm at the end of the first round, I'm probably still taking him.
Okay.
And I'm definitely taking him in the second round. If it's only 2 games. I just think he's going to have a big year. Those 2 games would hurt a little bit, but I think you can find enough production to play somebody else early on. So I would still take him. It does make it a little harder to take him in the top 5, especially in a CFF format. If this was C2C, I would have probably still grabbed him there just because I'm like, hey, I got him for the NFL side. I'll take a little hit on the college side. But on CFF, missing those 2 games hurts. So I push him down a bit. I just can't see him, even if it's only 2, going later than the second round anywhere.
All right, I just took Devin Neal there at the 111. I actually feel very, very happy about that. Again, you're talking about a top 10 running back from last year. Yes, he loses his offensive coordinator, but Lance Leopold's still around. They're still going to rely on him. Dang it, I was kind of hoping that Darius Taylor would kind of sneak around that turn there for me, but was not meant to be there. So let's see what else I could kind of consider here. I think I'm gonna go running back. I just gotta decide which running back am I going to go for here. I think I am gonna go with a guy that I almost made a decision there. I should really make a decision here at some point. Um, you know what? Screw it. Lock in 1,100 yards. I've been harsh on him recently, but I'll probably, you know what? It's been too long since I've had a share of him, and I'm not going to be able to get him to come back to me on the 3-4 turn there. So I'll just take Taj Brooks here, load up on two running backs that I can basically pencil in for 1,200 yards between the two, or each between the two of them. So
I love Neal. Neal's a guy I'm grabbing everywhere. If I'm drafting near the end of the mid to late first round, I'm all over Neal. I love Neal. I think Kansas offense is going to be pretty solid. And this is coming from a Mizzou guy, so I'm not lying, because I want to say Jayhawks are going to be terrible, because that would make me feel better in my heart. But I think Kansas is going to be good on offense, and Neal's a guy I really like. So I've drafted him in quite a few leagues. I think they're going to lean on him pretty heavy, and I think they're going to try to keep Daniels from getting hurt. So they're going to lean on Neal a little bit more.
I for sure, I agree 100% about them trying to keep Daniels healthy. That's probably the one thing that makes me a little queasy about Jalen Daniels, because again, it sounds like he's performing well in camp right now, but like they're not going to want to run him nearly as much given the issues that we've had there in the past. Couple of more questions here in the chat. Out of Rhythm Fantasy Sports says, is Carson Beck even good for fantasy or only a good football player? So Beck is an interesting one, right? Because he actually, like, when you go back and look at the stats from last year, right? He actually finished, let me find him real quick. He was QB 31 in all of college fantasy last year. So he wasn't a slouch by any stretch of the imagination. And you can't help but feel that because of the way Georgia runs their offense, right? Whenever they get down within the 10-yard line, they're just going to run it over and over again, just manhandle everybody up front. They're going to score a lot of rushing touchdowns with their running backs that probably would normally go to a quarterback in another system, right? So Carson Beck's always going to probably have less passing touchdowns than you would necessarily want. But he also passed for 4,000 yards last year. So you're looking at a guy that does provide you the passing stats that you need to be somewhat fantasy relevant. So I think I don't think he's a bad quarterback for fantasy by any stretch of imagination. It's just the fact that he is a pocket passer for the most part. He can run a little bit, but for the most part, he's a pocket passer. You take him knowing that the ceiling isn't there for him, but he can provide you a safe floor just because he's on offense that'll score likely 40 points a game. What do you think, JT?
I think seeing CFF leagues, he's kind of a steal, because I think people are kind of down on him. So I think he's falling. And again, like you said, if you're going to start 2 QB or start 2 QB with a super flex, like Beck's a starter. Is he going to put up crazy numbers again because he doesn't have the running? Oh, and I just got sniped here. Ooh. FF Goose just took Damian Martinez, who's going to be my pick. I love Martinez this year, so he was going to be my guy here at the 2-9. This one's a tough one, and I know a lot of people are like, ooh, how many carries is he going to get? I actually like Judkins and Henderson both. I'm going to take Judkins for Ohio State. I think this team's going to run the ball enough. I just don't think they're going to be throwing the ball around as much as people think, and I think they're going to pound the rock, and I think there's going to be enough games where they're smoking people, where these guys are going to get enough carries and get enough yards. So I'm taking a chance on him. It's a little bit of a reach. I did want Damian Martinez there. I just think he ends up being the man in Miami.
So here's my deal with TreVeyon Henderson, right? The big thing for me is they got him to come back, and I don't see how you get him to come back by saying, hey, come back for another year where we'll put more wear and tear on your body while you make much less money than you would in the NFL. Oh, and by the way, we're going to go grab one of the best running backs in the portal, not just the portal, in the country, out of the portal, and we're going to regulate you to RB2. To me, like, it doesn't make sense at this point to have Henderson behind Judkins. I think Henderson, being the guy who's been with Ohio State the last couple of years, Ryan Day, if not anything, is pretty loyal to the guys that have been there with his program for the most part. You can see in a lot of the practice reports that the transfers coming in have absolutely had to earn their way onto the field. Nothing was given to them. And I really would be willing to put good money on the fact that Travion Henderson will outcarry and outproduce Judkins this year. I don't see a way they convince him to come back without him being the lead guy there. Now, that isn't to say that both Judkins and Henderson can't have productive games. Obviously, like, it's a Chip Kelly offense. We've seen him produce multiple 1,000-yard running backs in the same season before. I'm not even saying that either one of them will end up being fantasy relevant. We could have 2 700-yard backs here at Ohio State this upcoming year. I'm just saying that, like, we're going to see it probably in this draft, and because I'm saying it out loud, I'm sure somebody's going to prove me wrong here, but I've seen as much as 5 to 6 round difference between Judkins and Travion, and that doesn't make any sense to me at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I still like both of them a lot for Debbie and CTC. It's a little
of course, right?
CFF. Here's the thing is, I kind of think they're going to get up a lot of times. I think both these guys are going to get a ton of carries. So even if Travion, which I kind of agree with you there, I think he kind of is the lead guy. I think Judkins is going to get a lot of carries. I just don't think there's any way he said, "Oh, I'm going to go from being the number one clear-cut guy at Ole Miss to being like a has-been."
Oh, for sure.
I think they just, hey guys, we want you both to be NFL stars. We want you both to get a lot of carries, but we don't want you both to get too many carries. So I think they've really sold these guys on like, hey, you're going to split time, but you're both going to get a load of carries. And even if Judkins ends up being the backup, I think he gets 1 million carries because I think they're going to be up in a ton of games. They're going to want to run the football, especially if Will Howard ends up being the QB. So I think there's going to be production there. But like I said, I do think that is a bit of a reach pick by me there.
No, and a little preview for our running backs crash course tomorrow, which will release to everybody. John Lobb basically lays out a scenario where he basically thinks that like Henderson will be the guy out front there, and then like for the first half, and then Judkins brings up the rear, especially in a lot of blowouts, right? Where he's the fresh legs, you just hand the ball off to him 20 times to finish out the second half of a game.
Yeah, I love John Lobb, and I totally agree with that. I absolutely agree. That's why I think Judkins is maybe he's not the man, the technically the starter, but I think he's going to put up points because I think that's the case. They're going to get up in games and just want to run the ball, and I think they're going to give Judkins a chance to pile up the stats in games that they're blowing people out.
No, absolutely, for sure. And the one thing that Judkins has over Henderson is the fact that Henderson has an injury history. Judkins does not. Now, my point that I made on the podcast tomorrow is that I'm not so sure what the difference between injury tolerance from a coaching perspective they have at Ole Miss versus Ohio State. We know for a fact that Ryan Day, once his guys get banged up, he's not afraid to sit them for multiple games because he wants to save them for the end. He's going for a national championship. Versus Ole Miss, like if Judkins got banged up and everything, is he still being put out there? I think the answer was yes to start last season. So we'll definitely see. All right, I'm back on here on the turn. Let me go ahead and make my pick here. I think I'm just going to keep potentially loading up. No, I was kind of hoping one of those two receivers there. Joe, you're driving me crazy here on this turn. Let's see. Do I go quarterback? No, Milrose off the board. That's probably the only guy I consider on this turn. Do I just keep loading up at running back? Because there's a lot of running backs still on the board here. Yeah, I think I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take a guy that I haven't gotten a lot of shares of this year. Let's go Mario Anderson. This is my grand slam pick here, right? This is my analogy I use all the time with running backs, especially where I got my power hitters, Neal, Brooks. Those are my guys that are safe picks. They get me on base, right? With my baseball analogy, they get me on base. I got a guy at second. I got a guy at first. I got Hughes there. He probably gets me bases loaded here. And then Mario Anderson, man, if it works out for him at Memphis, I got an absolutely stacked running back room here now. And I'm going to have to be a lot more careful about who I pick at receiver because I'm going to have to get a bit creative there. But, man, the value of running back was just too much for me to pass up right now.
I love Anderson. Honestly, if he would have got back to me, he was my pick here. I think that Memphis offense is gonna cook this year. And for anybody who just got the new college football game,
They're fun.
playing with Memphis is awesome. They have like 20 alternate jerseys. Anybody's a big uni fan, that's me. Helmets, jerseys, pant combinations. They have like the most combinations of any team on the game, and they all are awesome. So I actually just started a dynasty with Memphis because I love Anderson, I love Hennigan, I love Rock Taylor, and the uniform combination sold me with all the different ones. So I jumped in and actually played with Memphis on there, and I love them.
Very nice. A couple of questions here. Mitch Hart asks us, how about the 2 Ohio State wide receiver transfers this offseason? So Julian Fleming heading over to Penn State, Keon Gray's going over to Cal. Are we interested in drafting either one? I'll keep it short. I'm not really. I don't think either one of those are really systems that I love for fantasy. Cal might be somewhat interesting over there, but I think there's other guys that I like in that system better than Keon Gray's. Although it does sound like Keon Gray's is making a pretty good impression in the fall camp so far, but the fact that he wasn't there during the spring makes me a little hesitant to really go all in there. What about you, JT? Fleming or Gray's interest you?
Not really. I might take a shot on Fleming and late, as my last round pick flyer in case Allard. I still like Drew Allard. If he pulls it together, I think Fleming ends up being his guy. So that would be like my take in case it hits, especially if I had Allard at QB, I would take it for the possible stack. But that would be me. I wouldn't want to count on it. That would be my one. I'm like, okay, I'm hoping it hits. I think it's a small percentage, but I'm hoping it hits at some point. But I wouldn't look into it and try to look at grabbing those guys together. But if it happened, if I got Allard at a solid spot in the draft, I would maybe take Fleming late, hoping he ends up being his number one.
Gotcha. All right, JT, Goose is ahead of you here, but who are you looking at here at the 4-9?
I tell you what, my boy Chris for Fantasy and Frames, killing it, taking Hampton, James. I love LaQuinn Allen. So him getting LaQuinn Allen in the third, I ended up going Tez Johnson. I was thinking about Allen there. He actually went Allen. And then Diamond Edwards coming back. Like I said, Anderson and Edwards were two guys that I was definitely considering coming back here. If I was in a best ball league, I would be taking Travion Henderson here with my Judkins and hoping whoever hit. I would absolutely be doubling them up. If I'm in a start lineup league, I'm like, I don't know if I want to put that pressure on myself every week of trying to pick the right guy or playing them both.
For sure.
Even though it's possible that both of them could go here. Oh man, there's just a lot of guys in this range I like, but I just am not 100. Trey Harris is right here, who I like, but like you said, I just don't know if he's a guy I can count on week to week.
It's a best ball league.
So actually, no, that you did say best ball. I did change my mind because we are talking best ball instead of lineup. I am taking Henderson because of that, specifically because it is best ball. I love the fact that I have both of them, and if one of them gets hurt, the other guy is absolutely going to eat.
Oh yeah, I would say there's the nuclear option.
Yeah, so I actually don't mind taking that chance, especially now that you reminded me this is best ball. I actually like that in best ball. You're really putting the pressure yourself on a start lineup league, but I have no problem multiple stacking guys in best ball leagues. Just especially when they're on good offenses. The Oregon guys, the Colorado guys.
Oh yeah.
I have no problem stacking a bunch of those guys on top of each other because those teams are going to put up points. It just matters who's the guy's going to hit every week. And I don't mind investing heavily in teams that are going to have a good offense.
I love what Dylan Reynolds is doing here at the 1-1 pick here. Again, taking Ashton Jeanty, and then look at this receiver room he picked up here. Ricky White, Jalen Royals, Will Pauling. Man, go back just 2 months ago, and you would have told me that I could get a team with all four of those guys on the same team. I wouldn't believe you. I wouldn't believe that there was a world where you could do that. And here we are now. Obviously, Blake Anderson getting fired at Utah State. Freaking Luke Fickell just poo-pooing on the Will Pauling parade recently has been driving me nuts. Oh my God. He's like, oh, well, if he gets 80-something catches again, we did something wrong. Why? He's your best player on offense. That is the most insane take I've ever heard from a coach of like, well, if we give him the ball too many times, we did something bad. Why? He's like, oh, but he might be more efficient on the lesser catches. I'm like, I don't care. Feed him. Just get him the ball over and over and over again. Anyway, that's my rant. Another Buckeye here.
I think that's a little bit of BS on his part. I think they're going to try to get him the ball, but that is kind of crazy for a coach to say, we're not very good if we get our best player the ball all the time. What? Like,
exactly.
I mean, it is kind of nuts here. And like I said, I'm just going to lean full into this stack here now with Emeka Egbuka dropping there. I think he has a big bounce back year. I mean, I think he realizes like I could be a top possibly 10, 15 pick in the NFL draft if I have a monster season. I think they've got a lot of young guys who have a ton of talent, but I think Egbuka, he's, I think, by far their best wide receiver, at least right now to start the year. So I think they're going to lean heavily on him. And I don't mind putting a lot of stock in the Ohio State offense and the fact that I know they're going to have a lot of big games. There's going to be a couple down games. You know, Michigan game's always going to be tough defensively. Penn State game's going to be, whenever they play them, it's usually a defensive battle. But pretty much they roll the other teams they're supposed to roll. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm going to get production out of them.
So let's see. Brett White here asks about Andrew Paul, the former Georgia running back headed to Jacksonville State. This was easily one of the bigger L's I took earlier this offseason when Andrew Paul transferred out. I legit think that if he was still healthy, he could have landed anywhere in the country. Like, he is a good running back. And the fact that he landed at Jacksonville State, to me, signifies that his injury situation is a little bit worse than I was kind of led to believe, right? He is a talented back. If he was healthy, he would have stayed in the Power 4. And he did travel to a couple Power 4 schools. He did look at Michigan State. Again, I don't know if he actually visited Clemson, but I know he had to have been considering them, considering the fact that, they were heavily recruiting him for the end of his recruitment there. And so I think that as much as I want to like the landing spot, as much as I want to like the fact that Andrew Paul is playing in the Sun Belt, or no, not even Sun Belt, CUSA, excuse me, it's, to me, just signifies that I would be hesitant to believe that he's going to be fully healthy going into this year. What about you, JT?
I like it in the fact that I think he's a really good running back. I agree with you that the fact that he didn't end up somewhere bigger does actually scare me. He's another one. He's like kind of a Fleming for me. I'm willing to take a shot late in drafts on him in the hopes that he gets it together and ends up being their best player. But the fact that he did end up there is a little the country. How did no one else get him but Jacksonville State? To me, if he had some kind of connection there, I'd be like, oh, well, he took a smaller school because he knows one of the coaches or his cousin's on the team or something, something like that. But for him just to randomly end up there is worrisome. I'm taking him again, but I'm taking him as a flyer late in leagues with the idea that if he doesn't hit, he's probably one of my first guys I'm going to drop. If I'm in a league that I can drop and pick up waivers, that's where I'm at with him.
Woof. Joe, man, I love Cam Cook, and I agree he's been getting drafted too late, but man, 6th round, that's quite the leap since a couple months ago. Kind of hoping I could get him later. Let's see. I'm back on the clock here. I just took Rock Taylor. Again, you were talking about earlier the Memphis offense.
I love Rock. I love that Memphis offense. I have no problem piling up Memphis players this year. I think they're going to score a lot of points.
And I'm trying to decide who I want to go to with my next wide receiver pick here. I think I'm going to try to play the ADP game here a little bit. Take a guy that I know won't make it back to me here. And Derwin Burgess, I'll continue to invest in that air raid system down there in Statesboro. Plus, I've had an intern with me all summer who goes to school at Georgia Southern. So, Chase, if you're listening, this is my love letter to you because I couldn't get Jalen White. But I'll take Taylor and Burgess as my two top receivers here and kind of see what falls to me as things come around to me here. So let me double check to see if I'm making sure I don't miss any questions in the chat. Oh, yes, Ryan Karp asked in the chat, what are some G5 teams that if you're looking at just taking shots on later in drafts, you're just investing in the system. You're just taking shots on guys that could go, that could pop off late in draft. I think to me, probably the best example of this is Colorado State, because obviously we know Torrey Horton, right? We know Braden Fowler, Nicolosi. He goes pretty late. But there were 240 vacated targets there last year. They got to go to somebody, right? And it's not entirely clear who's that going to be. I've been investing a lot in Dylan Goffney, their slot wide receiver there. But if you're taking shots on, some of the tight ends like Vince Brown, Jackson Warren is a true freshman that is bringing a lot of excitement to some of the boards. Justin Ross, not Justice Ross Simmons, but Justin Ross is apparently a receiver that has started kind of making some noise in the Colorado State circles. That's an offense that I personally would take shots on. What about you, JT? Are there any offenses in the G5 that, get to the end of a draft or like, I'll just take shots at this team?
Yeah, there's a few guys out there, like I said, I like the Memphises. I like the Hawaiis. I think Colorado State's one. I actually think a team that might end up being sneaky good, but you're literally just taking a total guess on right now, is San Diego State. With Lewis as the coach, I like Duffy at quarterback. I really like Lewis Brown, who came over from Colorado State to San Diego State. Cooper, running back. They've got a lot of transfers in there, but I actually think that this team could end up being a sneaky good offense. So if you're looking for a team late, like, hey, maybe I could stack some guys and kind of see what happens. The Aztecs are a team I'm kind of looking at going later in the season.
No, I think it's a great call.
A couple guys I was going to take here. Gadsden was my look. I love him for Syracuse. I think with the new addition of quarterback McCord at quarterback, he's going to be a lot better. I like Trey Harris and White were on my list, so now I'm like a little bit racing here to figure out who I want because I really liked a lot of those guys. I'm going to end up going with McBride. I know there's him Ashlock, who's the guy to take. I like McBride a ton. I think they're going to throw the ball around. So for me here, with a couple of those guys already gone in front of me who I would have taken, I think he's worth a shot here in the 6th.
Oh, so you did take McBride, even though with all the issues that he's dealing with right now legally?
Yeah, we'll see what happens. It's one of those things. Like, I think a lot of these times these things end up happening after the year, so we'll see. It's probably reached there with like that just happening. He was on my list, and like I said, a little bit of a panic pick because the 4 guys I was going to take just went right in front of him, and so I grabbed him. But yeah, probably dropping mostly in most leagues. I really wanted Gadsden, Harris, or White there, to be honest with you, and they all went in front of me, and I looked up and realized I only had 20 seconds left and made a desperation pick.
Yep, all good. Again, I like a lot of the guys that come off in this range. Lacey was one of the guys that I was considering at my last pick there. Squirrel White there was another guy I was kind of taking a look at. Man, Dylan Reynolds just loading up on wide receivers there. I tell people all the time, like, early on in drafts, whatever the position that you feel the least comfortable with drafting late is the one you got to hit on early. And it looks like for Dylan, that's wide receiver. Man, I'm curious to see, Dylan, who you take late at running back, because clearly you seem pretty comfortable with going after that. Let's see, Dalvin Smith going off there as 7-2. So JT, I'm curious how you feel about this with Dalvin Smith losing his tight end eligibility. He actually hasn't seen a huge drop in his ADP since then, because I think people are still willing to think that, okay, he's still the wide receiver 1 of Western Kentucky potentially. Or do you follow that train of logic? Is that who you're investing in with the Hilltoppers, or what do you think?
I'm a little nervous about them, to be honest with you. Obviously they've proven they're a great CFF offense. I'm nervous about who I want there overall, just because I'm not 100% sure. Like, he ends up guaranteeing being the guy getting 80, 90 catches. And no tight. Obviously, the tight end was a little bit. It was sneaky when you could play him there, just in case. I have not found myself taking a lot of Western Kentucky guys, not because I don't believe in Western Kentucky. I'm just not sure who ends up being the actual guys there that end up being the big producers. So I found myself more times than not avoiding them just because of that.
No, I totally get that. And you just took Haynes King here as your second quarterback to pair up with Caden Salter. I haven't actually grabbed a quarterback yet. That might be something I need to consider here. What do you think about Haynes King? Are you worried about that schedule? They got a rough one.
They got a kind of a tough schedule. I have to be honest, I slightly misdrafted there. I meant to take Hennigan. It's all right. Don't worry about it. I'll take Haynes King. I meant to take Hennigan there because I told you I love that Memphis offense. But I do like Haynes King too. I have him in quite a few leagues. I just think he's going to be a big play guy. I think people think about Georgia Tech being really boring from the past, but they've kind of opened it up more. I think they're going to lean heavily on him. The tough schedule does hurt, but I think sometimes the tough schedule helps you stat-wise because you have to keep pushing the ball. You have to try to stay in games. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping he ends up becoming one of those guys where he just gets me a lot of garbage stats at games where they're down and he's just trying to keep them in it.
No, I definitely agree with you. Again, there's a lot to like there. And it's one of those things where, especially if you're like in a regular redraft league, right? Like, you draft Haynes King here in the 7th round, knowing that he can get to you to the playoff, but he ain't going to win you the league, right? Like, he'll have his great weeks up until that point where he has a bye week in the first week of the playoffs if you have a playoff schedule in week 12. And then week 13 is NC State, week 14 is Georgia. Just a brutal end to the schedule there. Although he did pretty decent against Georgia last year, so maybe. But he also has to go into Athens this year. So
yeah, I also think I like what we were talking about. I was like, hey, have him get me there, have him have a good season. Let me find maybe a guy that has a pretty good matchup at the end and pick up a quarterback late that I can throw in. Brady Cook was that guy for me 2 years ago, where Missouri had a really easy end of the year schedule. People were like, "Really, you're playing Brady Cook in the playoffs?" I'm like, "Yep," and he smoked because they played like a G5 team, or they played like somebody, I can't remember who it was. It was like Jacksonville State or something. They played somebody like that, and then they had one of the worst. Then they had Arkansas.
Yeah, it was Arkansas at the end of the year every year.
Guys, and he smoked them those last couple of weeks. And so the guys that I was starting all year, I sat and then I played him in the playoffs. So I think that's a strategy you can definitely use.
No, I definitely agree. Again, finding some of those guys with really soft schedules. I know Chris K actually just put out a great article on campuscanton.com regarding Power 4 quarterbacks that have some really, really nice end of season schedules there. And so I would recommend you guys go and check that out. All right, I'm looking at a very specific... Joe, come on, man! Come on. I knew as soon as I saw him, like, holy crap, I'm actually going to get him. I'm like, no, Joe's not going to allow this. Joe's not going to allow me to get Jefferson here in the 7th round. God damn it. That one hurt a little bit.
I know, I was going to take Hennigan before he got back to you. You could get the triple stack with...
I couldn't afford to take that because I had too many week 13 or week 6 bye weeks already, so I had to kind of diversify myself a little bit here. Let's see, who do I want to go with here? You know what? I'll take Malachi Fields. Again, 100 targets last year. I'm not loving the idea of potentially Tony Muskett there being the top quarterback, but c'est la vie. We'll see what happens here, and I think I know who I'm going to go with here as my first quarterback on the way back. I don't love taking him, but I kind of talked myself into him being, a potentially fun option again here, kind of falling late. He was a top 10 quarterback at CFF last year. I don't love the coaching change here, but also the new head coach doesn't seem super in on actually changing a lot about this offense. So I'll take Tommy C. Let's take Tommy Castellanos out of Boston College. And don't love Bill O'Brien, running the offense or whoever he brought in from the Patriots that's never called plays before. But from all the interviews, it seems like there's not really much that they want to change here, right? The word is that Bill O'Brien came to Boston College because his son was getting work done in Boston for a medical issue already, and then this job just happened to open up, and so he came over here to be the head coach. And it seems like he's more interested in being with his family and everything rather than coming in and trying to build. Obviously, he wants to build a program. That, like, don't hear what I'm not saying here, but like he's not trying to fashion this program in his own image. He's more coming in saying, all right, I saw what you guys had here working last year. Let's try to keep that going as much as possible. So with that narrative in mind that I've made up for myself, I'm going to be happy with my Tommy Castellanos pick here in the 8th round. So, and then again, I took Fields there. Again, he got 100 targets last year. I'm hoping he keeps that up again this year. So let's see. Any other notes in the chat here? I think we're good on questions up until this point. Oh, Mitch Hart did ask, Josh Meredith or Kyle Williams, who will Eckhouse throw the most to? Which, Mitch, you're not slick. It'll be John Mateer throwing the ball to these guys. The deal with Meredith versus Kyle Williams is this going to be the cop-out answer, but it really depends on what your team needs at that point, right? For me, if you have a bunch of upside wide receivers up until that point, or you haven't drafted any wide receivers and you know the rest of the wide receivers you're going to get are going to be high upside guys, but maybe high bust potential, I'd probably go Kyle Williams at that point. Versus if you got some solid wide receivers already and you're feeling good about them, go for a home run hit with Josh Meredith because he plays in that slot that's been so good to us over the last couple of years with Ben Arbuckle. That's kind of my thought on it. JT, what do you think about Kyle Williams versus Josh Meredith over there at Washington State?
I kind of agree with you. That's been just a hard spot to kind of figure out lately. I took a couple guys thinking, hey, that was going to be the guy last year. And it's just, I'm a little worried about what happens there. Cam Ward gone, some of the guys we thought were going to hit. They're just another one of those teams I'm kind of trying to avoid because they just don't know who's going to hit. I don't know what it's going to look like there. So usually these teams tend to have big offenses. I want a lot of those guys, but some of these teams are making me nervous this year because I just don't know what I'm getting. So I'm tending to avoid some of these teams. When I get into drafts, I see them come up and I'm like, do I really want to invest in that guy? And I'm like, or that team. And I'm like, I could probably talk myself into someone else typically.
I gotcha. All right, let's see. You're back on the clock here, JT. Who are you going with?
I do like Nussmeier coming there, but since I got 2 QBs here, this is a guy, might be a slight overdraft here, but I think he's going to have a huge year because I just know what Brett Bielema wants to do at Illinois. And I'm taking Caden Fegan. I just think Fegan is going to pound the rock. I love what they did with Chase Brown a couple years ago. I think he has a chance to be in that mix. Plus, I think the passing game is going to be better, which actually helps him. Because Chase Brown, when he was running in Illinois, it was the Chase Brown show and only the Chase Brown show. They could not throw the football. So I think the fact that Altmaier is going to be better, I like their wide receiver crew. I just think he's a guy we've just learned. Bielema knows how to play running backs. He knows how to get production, and he wants to run the football. And I think Fegan ends up being the guy. I've talked to him about a bunch in the past. If you ever listened to me on other podcasts, he comes from a super small school in Illinois. Mm-hmm. I mean, a 1A tiny school where he was bigger than every player on the field by far. So it was a little bit of a learning curve when he got to Illinois. He was a little underrated because of that, I think, because of the competition he played in high school. I think having last year to really learn what it's like to play with guys that are equally as physical as him and as big as him, I think it's really helped him improve. I think you're going to see a big breakout year for him this year.
I'm very much looking forward to it as well. And really between him and Josh McCray, they're probably going to be like kind of Tweedledee and Tweedledum there in that backfield, right? So maybe we don't see either one of them really break away from the other, but like if I'm going to take a shot on one of them, it's going to be Fagan. I know what Josh McCray gets me, right?
And McCray's going to – I like McCray. He's a pounder. Going to get you touchdowns. He's going to get you the hard yards, but he's not going to just come out, blazing. I think Fegan's the more athletic guy, so I think they're going to lean on him just a bit more And for this pick, I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get crap for it, but I feel like I gotta stay on brand. I'm a Shadur Sanders guy. I think he is gonna light it up this year. I think they're gonna be in a lot of close games and a ton of high scoring games. I think he's gonna have to throw the ball all over the field. I think he goes over 4,000 yards passing this year. I'm taking him here in C2C leagues. I'm taking him either in the first or second round because I still believe he ends up being the number one quarterback off the board next year. I know Carson Beck is really the guy people are leaning on. I think it ends up being Sanders for all the hate. So I am taking Sanders here because I gotta put my money where my mouth is here on Sanders.
No comment on Shadur Sanders.
I know you don't like him at all, and that's why I said I was like, I might as well take it and talk about it. I think Colorado has to throw the ball all over the field this year to stay in games, and I think he ends up with the wide receiving core he has. I think he is having a big game, and I like him better, even more in best ball because I think he's going to have some monster games and some tough games.
Again, no comment on the Buffs there. Love the Brady Cook there. Pick from Chris B.
I just talked about. I should have taken him. So I love that pick.
I'm getting killed in these quarterbacks here, man. Every time I think one of them's gonna make it back to me that I kind of like, it's just not happening for me here. Real quick, love the Dylan Sampson pick there from Justin Nottingham. We talk about him pretty extensively on tomorrow's episode of CTN, so y'all go check that out. And then Mitch, you asked about TJ Harden. Does anybody believing the Keegan Jones hype? I'm not. I'm still a believer in TJ Harden. He's the talent in that backfield. Keegan Jones is a fantastic change of pace back. And yeah, they're going to be on the field at the same time a lot of times because they provide two different threats. Keegan Jones is not going to be the guy you're going to throw up the middle 20 times in a game. It is going to be TJ Harden. He's going to be that guy. The big question with TJ Harden comes down between, can UCLA form a cohesive offense in year one with Brett Bielema? Can they get that system going there? Is Ethan Garbers not garbage and can do oh my gosh, what am I talking about here? Can he perform well enough to run a competent offense with UCLA? If so, Harden is going to be the best player in that offense, and they're going to have to rely on him. So, no, it's Harden or bust for me in that backfield. What about you, JT? Any strong feelings on TJ Harden?
I agree with you. I think Harden's the guy. I'm not taking many UCLA guys, but if I am, I'm taking Harden. I'm taking Servant. Those are the two guys I'm eyeing on UCLA's team.
All right, flag plant season. I'm taking Chris Bell here at Louisville. I don't buy the Ja'Cory Brooks stuff at all. We are full steam ahead on Chris Bell being the top outside wide receiver there at Louisville this year. And I'm going to go ahead and take my second quarterback here. I'll take Preston Stone, a guy I haven't gotten a ton of shares of this year. And so it's a very unique quarterback room compared to a lot of my other drafts that I've got here so far, but I'm kind of liking it. We'll see. We will definitely see. Jamie asks, how often are we drafting kids from smaller schools compared to these bigger schools? I don't know about you, JT, but I don't look at my teams in college fantasy and I look at them and say all right, what's my ratio of power 4 players to G5 players? Because there's so many factors that go into what makes a G5 player great versus a power 4 player great. It doesn't, to me, those factors usually end up superseding, what conference they're playing in. Now, granted, again, right, there's going to be conferences that I will target, right? I love so many of the Mountain West guys. I love taking shots at AAC guys. I love taking shots at Big 12 players, ACC, these teams or these conferences where the defenses aren't nearly as great. But again, it's not big school versus small school for me. It's specifically those conferences. And even beyond that, it's when I look at receivers, who gets me targets? I don't care if it's at, New Mexico or at Ohio State. I just care that the dude's getting 120 targets at receiver, right?
Yep.
Now, again, there's some things you got to plan for here, right? A lot of the MAC schools, they have brutal schedules to start the season, right? Where you're going up against a bunch of Power 4 teams. But even still, you kind of draft them knowing that you can't really play them those weeks, right? That's always kind of the deal with MAC players and some of the smaller school players, but it doesn't really stop me from drafting them per se. What about you, JT? Do you have any kind of thought that goes into like how many big school guys versus small school guys you go for?
I don't when it comes to CFF. I think I look at it a little more in like a C2C league. I want a little more big school guys because they have a shot at most likely having a chance at the NFL. But when I go to CFF, like you said, I want guys that I know that are in conferences that are known for offense, where we're going to see a lot of firepower. And then I also want to, if I am looking at it, I'm more looking at it, like you said, I'm not going to play these small school guys early because they're going to play brutally schedules against big schools and their teams are going to get worked. But I also want to look at those guys that have really nice schedule at the end of the year when all the big school guys are playing their rivals in tough games and they're not going to put up huge points, and I can play those smaller school guys late. So I'm not one person that looks at the schedule and puts a whole lot of business in the schedule, but CFF, I look at it more because I want that mix of the small school and the big school guys, where I know when the big schools have tough schedules, I can play the small school guys, and I can play the big school guys early when they're playing all the bums and all the small school guys are playing all the stud schools. So I do look at it that way. I don't care about having a certain amount of big school versus small school guys, but that's how I look at it, is like early season compared to late season. Where can I use those guys and utilize them?
I agree 100%. That is one of the bigger differences between college football and NFL fantasy, right? Where in NFL, yeah, you have good teams and bad teams, but the gap between, the Chicago Bears and the Kansas City Chiefs of the world is much smaller than, who's a really bad team? Freaking Kent State right now and Georgia, right? The gap between the two is miles, magnitudes bigger in college football. And so that's something you have to take it into account, the schedules in college football, at least somewhat, right? So
because you do see those times where you can get, like you said, with the extra bye weeks this year, is something I'm looking at a little bit, because later in the year you can actually get guys that are like have a nice 2 or 3 week schedule when your big dogs are going to be on the bench because they're bye weeks. Mm-hmm. You can get some guys who can step in and have big performances for you. So that's definitely something I want to kind of look at. It's not the end all be all for me when I'm drafting, but it's definitely something I'm keeping an eye on.
All right, got some good guys coming off the board. You took Justin Joly there, tight end out of NC State. That's your first tight end off the board. What do you like so much about Joly?
I just think that this North Carolina offense, I'm a Grayson McCall fan. I probably shouldn't bring him up since he hasn't been drafted yet, but I'm a big fan of him. I have him on a bunch of teams for the last couple of years in C2C leagues when he was at Coastal Carolina. I just think their offense is going to be really good this year. I like what they have on offense. I wanted Gadsden. I didn't get him, so I decided I was going to wait a couple rounds on tight end. Joly, I just think he's real athletic. I think he has a chance to be a really good player. And McCall, if people remember, absolutely loved Isaiah Likely when he was at Coastal Carolina. So I'm like, I think he's going to pepper Joly like he did Likely. I think he's up there with Conception as the top two guys as far as targets. So I like it a lot. I just think this NC State offense is going to be way improved. I want a piece of it. And I just think Joly, we always know it's tough to get.
Real quick, you have 15 seconds to make your next pick.
Yep, he's the guy. So then I'm going to go another pick you're going to hate. I'm going to go with Travis Hunter here.
I actually like the pick. I like the Travis Hunter
pick.
So
in best ball, I absolutely love it because he's going to he's going to have some monster games. I mean, it's a guarantee he's going to have 4 or 5 gigantic games. The question is, can he keep it up all year? If you're setting him in a offensive lineup, can he do it every week? I'm not 100% sure. I love him in C2C leagues because I think he is going to end up playing wideout in the NFL. So I think he's worth taking a shot on. But in best ball, I absolutely love him because I know he's going to give me at least 4 or 5 100-yard, 1-2 touchdown games. And again, because I think Colorado's going to have to score. That's their only chance of being in games this year. They're not going to stop anybody. They're going to have to absolutely light it up and score 30, 40 points if they're going to win.
Yeah, again, the only problem is that they have a massive downgrade at offensive coordinator, but that's neither here nor there.
I agree. I'm hoping that these guys with another year just can make those changes. But I have to tell you, I absolutely agree with you. That's my number one worry is the offensive coordinator spot blows it up for them. Because
Nope.
I thought Lewis was great last year. I'm still a little surprised at how things turned out with him there. I loved it when he got hired by San Diego State. I went to San Diego State my freshman and sophomore year of college. So
Nice.
I'm an guy. So he's the guy when they hired him, I was like, I'd love to hire. I absolutely loved it.
Oh no, anybody like anybody that was going to get Sean Lewis after his stint there at Colorado was going to be like somebody that CFF players were quickly going to fall in love with, right? And as you mentioned it before, like it's absolutely worth a system taking shots on, right? There's no clear number one guy there. I mean, I have my preferences, right? Like I like Lewis Brown there coming over from Colorado State, but it wouldn't shock me if the guy who looks like he's the number one guy at San Diego State to start the year ends up being a completely different guy by the time the end of the season comes. All right, I finally getting some good luck here on quarterback. I'm going to take the guy that you could have stacked with your tight end here. I'll take Grayson McCall at NC State. I'm probably going to have to go QB heavy here over the next couple of rounds here, although I do have quite a bit of guys that I like here. So maybe I got 3 of them already. I can probably take some shots on some guys a little bit later, potentially. Oh, it's back up me already. Mitch, I agree. I like CJ Bailey as well, but they're not going to bring in Grayson McCall just for him not to do it. And plus, McCall looked fantastic in the spring by all reports, and so I really think that it's going to be McCall's year this year, and Bailey's coming in next year.
If you're on a team where you get to keep Bailey, I'm drafting him. If it's a redraft league, I don't know if I want him at all. I think people have forgotten because McCall was beaten up at Coastal Carolina last year and sat out last year. He was uber efficient the 2 years before. I'm like 25 plus touchdowns, under 3 interceptions. I mean, the guy was really putting up fantastic stats. Like I said, he peppered Isaiah Likely, making Isaiah Likely an NFL player. I just think McCall, with the talent level at NC State, I really like what he can do this year. I mean, I have a ton of McCall in a lot of leagues.
All right. I'm taking my 4th quarterback here. I'm just loading up on these kind of mid-round quarterbacks right now. It's a bunch of dual threat guys for the most part. Give me Matt Sluka there at UNLV. Again, my eyes tell me that Malik Williams should give him a run for his money for that starting job at UNLV, so I'm a little worried about that. But my ears, man, every beat reporter that I talk to, every beat reporter that I read for UNLV is like dead set on Sluka is the guy. Doesn't matter how good Malik Williams looks over at UNLV. So I'm going to trust them, and I'm going to go with Sluka.
Whoever wins that job, I definitely want that guy.
Yep.
I got him old Missouri head coach, actually, defense coordinator, and then head coach there at UNLV. Did really nice things with them last year. I like that UNLV team. That's been my only hold up is who wins that job. But I definitely want whoever wins that job there in UNLV.
Alrighty. We're halfway through the 12th round here, y'all. Again, appreciate all of you guys leaving chats. Mitch, you have been very talkative tonight, and I appreciate that, sir. I love the commentary. Everybody else, don't be afraid to drop questions, drop comments in the chat there. Jamie, I appreciated your question earlier about big school versus small school guys here. If you guys have not already, go ahead and leave those likes. Again, I see plenty of people watching that I know for a fact have not hit that little thumbs up button, and I would appreciate it if you guys did. Yes, Mitch, I agree. Great pick there with Kobe Hudson. He was one of the guys that I was looking at on that last turn there. And if I remember correctly, no, it's not the team that drafted KJ Jefferson, but it is the team that has RJ Harvey. So I feel like that could work out there. Oh, I see the likes coming in. Appreciate all of you guys for listening to the call to action there. JT, who are you looking at here in the 12th round?
I've got an eye on a QB, but I also have another player. I'm seeing who Goose takes here. I don't want to give my other guy up that I'm thinking about taking. All right, so he took Mumsy, who I like from Memphis. Like I said, I love that offense. I want them. because I've got King, I'm gonna do it because I am a sucker for stacks, especially in best ball leagues. So I'm gonna take Singleton here to go with King. You know you're going to maybe have some bad weeks, but that's the best part about best ball is you get the big weeks with the stacks. And so I'm going to go Singleton there. I might have gone a different direction if I didn't have King, but with him falling to that spot, I really like him in the 12th to match up there with King.
I honestly, I do kind of like that. And Singleton is a guy that I've seen come off as early as like the 6th, 7th round. Some drafts, I like his value a lot more here in 12th round, especially in a best ball format. Mitch comments in the chat, pretty early for Lenora Sellers, don't we think? Well, he's here off in the 12th round. Let me check his ADP where he's been going. I think that's right about where he's been going. Again, his ADP is QB 36. I think I have him at QB 35. So yeah, a little bit early. His ADP is typically around the 16th round. That's usually when the quarterback 35, 36 typically comes off. So yeah, a little high for my taste here, especially with it being Chris's second quarterback off the board. Again, the upside there is obviously incredible, right? Like he uber athletic guy, dual threat guy, South Carolina, not afraid to check it around when they need to. I think, again, it could work out there, but I personally would not have taken him that early. What about you, JT? How do you feel about Lenora Sellers?
I know Chris loves Sellers. On Fantasy and Frames, he does the 1 Foot Down podcast on Mondays on college football. He loves Sellers and the upside. Again, sometimes it's the SEC. They're going to have a tough schedule, but man, they're really going to lean on him. And there's a chance that he puts up really solid numbers, even if South Carolina's bad, just because they're going to 100% rely on him. So to me, that's a swing for the fences pick. If Sellers does what he thinks Sellers can do, you're getting a guy that's going to put up some crazy stats. Now you're taking a huge chance because of the first year starter who hasn't shown it to everybody. We've seen the ability. We see what he could bring. So if I'm him, I equate it to a little bit to like an Anthony Richardson in the NFL. Like you look at him, you think you know what he can do. If he does what you think he can do, it's a home run. If he doesn't, you could be in trouble. I think Chris is willing to take the shot at the home run here, and that's why he took Sellers there.
Nope, totally understandable. You're back on the clock here, JT. What are you looking at here? Uh-oh. Lost JT. We'll have him back here in a second. Jamie, I see your question there in the chat about the Iowa State wide receivers. Are they worth the flyer? I know Mitch is a big fan of Noel. He's made it quite plain in the chat there. He and I actually had this conversation a couple of weeks ago regarding, because he asked me, like, why is Higgins typically going off so much higher than Noel? And my thing is that my explanation is I personally haven't targeted either one of them a ton. I think they both go a little bit too high compared to where my rankings are here. Compared to where they go in drafts. But the reason why I think Higgins typically goes higher is because one, he's going to play in that same outside position that made Xavier Hutchinson an absolute monster for fantasy. And in addition to that, Noel, you've kind of seen the upside, right? He is that deep threat option for Iowa State. Like when he catches the ball, he's probably hitting it somewhere down the field. And yes, Mitch, he did outscore Higgins after Halloween, but that was because, again, he was more efficient with his catches. Higgins was still getting more targets per game out of the two. And also, again, people kind of feel like they know what they're getting out of Noel. His production hasn't greatly exceeded itself and doesn't point to a ceiling of a potential CFF wide receiver versus Higgins. Again, playing in that same outside position that Xavier Hutchinson was in. Looks like we're getting JT back here. Welcome back, JT.
Sorry about that. I had a plug come undone and it died on me. I didn't realize it came unplugged. I apologize about that. So sorry, I'm back in the mix.
All good, all good. We're discussing the Iowa State wide receivers here, and so I was kind of pointing out why people would potentially be looking at taking Higgins over Noel. And again, I was mostly pointing to the fact that he's playing the outside position where Xavier Hutchinson was. I've been pointing out to the fact that like Noel for the longest time was kind of like a deep threat guy. He's been around. People feel like we know what we're getting out of him versus Higgins kind of came on the scene last year. And a lot of Devy people just watch him and think he's the better receiver out of the two. I mean, he did average more yards per catch last year at 18.5 versus 12.2 for Noel. And so people are kind of pointing to 12.4, excuse me. I don't want to shortchange Noel there. So people are kind of pointing to a potential higher ceiling there for Higgins out of the two. Do you have a strong feeling on either the Iowa State wide receivers?
I'm leaning Higgins personally. I was a big Xavier Hutchinson fan. I still think he has a shot to kind of to do something. He's behind a lot of good guys there in Houston in the NFL, but I like Hutchinson a lot at Iowa State. I'm leaning Higgins because I think he's more of that type of player. So if I'm taking one of the two, I'm probably taking Higgins.
And again, that's what I was trying to explain. Like, I think that's kind of the idea behind why people are going with Higgins. I'm gonna double tap tight end here. Two guys here that I think are falling way too late. Jake Briningstool, Luke Lachey. One's a system play there with Iowa. The other one's a volume play with Briningstool. Dude was just peppered with targets last year. And outside of Holden Willis, Jake Briningstool is actually, according to my tight end projections, which tight end is the only position that I fully project out because it's just so hard to differentiate guys in rankings sometimes. Briningstool is actually my second most targeted tight end among all of these guys. And so I'm going to take the volume play there. I'll take the system play with Lachey, and I'm happy. I'm feeling happy. So let's see. You got some more questions here in the chat. Donald Giebel says, I don't know if it's Giebel or Geibel. My apologies, Don. He says, how do you value some of these big school running backs transferring to smaller schools? He's specifically thinking Jordan Houston going to Marshall, Eli Sanders going to New Mexico, some of the guys going down to the MAC. I'm thinking, oh my God, what's a good example of some of the powerful running backs?
Well, we had Petaway transfer from North Carolina, James Madison.
Thank you. Great example.
He's going to be like a hit. I mean, he's a guy in a lot of Devy leagues and C2C leagues. People are all over him coming out, and then he's kind of moved on. But we've seen guys can go to James Madison and end up blowing up, especially for CFF production. So that's one that I wasn't early on in the year, and then when he landed there, I was like, oh, this is a guy I might want to put on my radar.
And I think it's another thing, by the way, Goose, great pick there with Devin McHugh, he was somebody I was looking at coming back on the next turn here. And I think it's also something we got to be somewhat careful of, because this was something that, again, I started liking the idea of Delbert Mims, the NC State running back transferring over to Eastern Michigan. And I was like, okay, I'll take that shot there. Again, he's power four back. They got nobody else there. And then I listened to the G5 Hive interview again, which, again, I'll give those guys shout-outs all day long for all the stuff that they provide. And when they did Eastern Michigan, he was very quick to point out, like, you might assume that because he's coming from the Power 4 that he'll just be the guy. But that's, at least for right now, that's not the case. They got other guys that are kind of coming there ahead of them. Obviously, Samson Evans was their bell cow back for a while. It doesn't seem like they're ready to go back to a bell cow yet. They need somebody to emerge there. Maybe that's still Mims, but I do think people need to be somewhat careful of just assuming Power 4 guy at G5 school, automatic starter. I think we need to be a bit careful with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a little bit of something we fall into. Like, oh, if he's going to a smaller school, he must be the guy. But I think people underestimate sometimes the little things that make a difference between a guy ending up at a G4 and a G5. Mm-hmm. It might just be where you played, conference you were in, some other things. Oh, Waters, great pick there. He was a guy I was definitely thinking about taking back here. I took RJ Maryland. I think he's got a shot to have really good production at tight end, which we all know is something very tough to get in CFF at tight end. Waters was the guy that was right there on my list. I was just staring at. I gotta look here and decide who I want instead, because that was gonna be my guy. You know what I'm gonna do, and this is a little bit of reach. This is guessing out here. I'm gonna take Zachariah Branch. I know he's more of a Devy guy, for a lot of people, but I believe in Lincoln Riley's offense. I don't believe in necessarily Lincoln Riley, the head coach, being great because we've seen at USC, but the guy can put up points. They're going to have to get the ball to somebody. They pretty much cleared out that wide receiver room after the last 2 years, so it's pretty wide open. I think Branch is the guy that ends up being the man there, and USC is going to, as we've seen, I think they're very similar to Colorado. They're going to have to score to be in games because they're just not stopping anyone. So I'm going to take a shot on Branch that he ends up being the guy. Now, who's the quarterback that is getting him the ball? To me, that's still a question. I really want to know because whoever the guy that is, I probably want him on my team. But I'm just not 100% sure. Do you have a strong feeling on who you think wins the USC QB job?
I am less strong than I was a couple months ago. Again, I think that I still think it's Miller Moss day one, and it just becomes a matter.
I kind of think so too.
And then it's just a matter of can he hold on to the job from there? And he's got a if he can make it through Michigan, I think it's his job the rest of the year. Because again, they got a rough 3-game schedule to start, or 3-game schedule to start the year there. And if he can make it through that without Mayava being given a shot, I think he should be good for the rest of the year. But we'll definitely see. I'm looking at Miller Moss. I'm probably not going to take him here, but he is still on the board. And so
and that's what I was wondering, because he's a guy that I've kind of picked in different levels of drafts this year. I've got a decent amount of share of. I haven't taken him everywhere, but he's a guy. He showed just enough last year in the bowl game that I think Lincoln Riley knows how to coach offense. He knows how to coach quarterbacks. They're going to put up stats. So whoever ends up being the guy, I think you want. But like you said, it's I agree. I think if Moss shows out early, he holds the job. If he struggles a little bit, I don't think they'll hesitate to look at someone else. So I think it really comes down to how he plays early part of the season.
No, right? And it's clear as day that Lincoln Riley wanted to get somebody else in that quarterback room. They almost had Will Howard. They eventually went out and got Jaden Mayava there, stole him from Georgia. Again, he was originally committed to Georgia. Literally the next day, they were like, nope, we want you to come here instead. And also Mayava kind of fits a little bit more of what Lincoln Riley wants to do with quarterback. Again, he's a little bit more mobile. He can kind of move around the pocket a bit more rather than Miller Moss, who can run a little bit, but when you watch him, you can tell it's not really his strong suit. So we'll see. I'm back on the clock here, and Brett,
as you're picking, I'll say to jump on this US thing as you're looking to decide who you're going to pick. That's why I took Nelson in the 13th round. The fact that he moved on from USC to Boise State, I still believe in the towel is a little bit of a shocker that he took the step down there. I think he absolutely has a shot to blow up at Boise State. So he's the guy that I'm looking at, even though he's a freshman, hasn't ever played. The talent level's there, and that type of offense with that type of team with JT as running back, I just think he has a shot to put up some real ridiculous numbers. So I'm trying to grab him anywhere I can, depending on where he goes in the drafts I'm in.
Yeah, my only thing with Nelson is that I'm not entirely sure how much they're going to really rely on him when you got a backfield there of GNT and John Bray Dubar, who I think is also an incredibly talented back. They're going to want to run as much as they possibly can with those two, right? They're going to be able to run over everybody. So I don't know if that's going to turn into a situation kind of like what you get at Georgia some years, right? Where, again, you're just running the ball so much that not really sure how much is left over for other people to get opportunities here. Brett pointed out in the chat that I had not taken a running back since the Reagan administration. He is correct. I drafted 4 straight running backs, and now I take my 5th and 6th running back here in the 15th and 16th round. So I went a while without running back. I feel like I got 2 incredible guys here in Javon Jackson and Dylan Carson. Jackson was great at Austin Peay last year. He follows his coach up to the CUSA here. Obviously, yes, that is a jump up from the FCS to the FBS level. I am expecting somewhat of a regression here just because of the upkeep in competition. I don't think I'm going to see a difference in volume. I still think you're going to see Javon Jackson get 200 carries from this coaching staff again. They didn't bring anybody else. In fact, UTEP lost their top 2 rushers from last year to Texas State. And so the backfield is wide open for Javon Jackson to clearly be the guy there. And then my 6th running back off the board here, Dylan Carson. I'm just taking a shot on the Air Force Superback here, right?
I love Carson. Yep. I love Carson. I love that pick.
Yeah, Emmanuel Michel was great for 3 games last season before things kind of fell apart for the Falcons down the stretch, and also Michel got hurt. In addition to that, like Brad Roberts was a beast for 2 years for CFF, so if I can get that with my 6th running back here, feeling mighty fine. Mighty fine.
Yeah, but I like Carson. I think, anytime you can figure out who you think the guy is going to be at Air Force, I think it's worth investing in.
All righty. I'm starting to load up my queue a little bit more here.
Yeah, I'm kind of searching through, figuring out who I need to pull out of the mix here. So I'm in the same boat here as we got next couple of pictures. Mason Taylor just went to Chris. Another guy. I love Mason Taylor. I've got him in a lot of Devy leagues. If I'm taking a tight end in Devy, which I don't usually, if I am, I'm taking Taylor because I think Taylor ends up being a pretty high profile NFL tight end. I think he's really good.
For sure. Who are you taking here, JT?
Oh, I am looking at my list and trying to decide who I love. I am thinking, it's a toughie for me. There's a couple tight ends I like here, but since I already got 2, it is making it a little more difficult. I think I'm going to take Brown out of Kentucky.
Okay.
I think they're going to be. I think they're going to. Vandergrift's going to help that offense, and I think again they're going to put some guys up. I don't think Kentucky's going to be very good, but I think they're going to put up some stats.
Yeah, I'm a little worrisome about Barry and Brown there at Kentucky. Definitely a big regression last year. It was expected that he would have a big year with Liam Cohen there, an offensive coordinator, but clearly things just didn't really work out there. Mitch Hart poking at you in the chat saying that Barry and Brown's a nice wide receiver 3 at Kentucky. So clearly he's not a big fan of Barry and Brown there. I think he's a big fan of Dane Key and Jay Macklin above him, but I don't know. I still like the talent of Brown. It's just a matter of can they utilize him correctly.
Yeah, and I like him a lot more in a best ball league than I do in a lineup league because I'm probably a little nervous about ever putting him in my starting lineup in a lineup league. So best ball, I feel like he has a shot to have some big games. It's going to be interesting there. I do like Vandergrift. I think the Kentucky offense is going to be better.
Love that Loveland pick there from Dylan Reynolds there. Maybe it's because I'm just getting closer to the season and I'm just getting fooled into thinking that half of these tight ends are actually going to have any kind of value during the regular season. But I
agree with that.
But I'm looking at so many of these guys in this range and I'm like, yeah, Maryland, Prescorn, Cosio, Taylor, all these guys feel great, man.
I know it's like if I wouldn't have just taken Maryland and already taken Jolly, I was looking at my list and I'm like, man, I really love a ton of these tight ends, but I'm like, do I need to go third tight end already? Which kind of seems a little over the top. We're only
halfway through.
Like a lot of these guys and being best ball, I think as we discussed it here, I think I talked myself and I think taking value for Michigan State. I have him in a lot of leagues. I think he's going to have a good year for them. And I think anytime you get an advantage at tight end is a key. So I'm while 3 tight ends is more than I wanted at this point in the draft, I'm going to go with value and take those guys.
Yanni asking in the chat says, can I order a CFF draft board anywhere? Yanni, you don't have to order anything. You have to pay for a draft board. I can just DM me on Twitter at CFF_Jared. I'll send you one. I'll pick up any of the 8 drafts that we've done on these live streams so far this year. You tell me what you want. You want a 6-point passing touchdown league? I got that for you. You want a power 4 or G5 only one? I got that for you. Just let me know, Yanni. Ron, I need you to shush. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, Mitch says I'm the draft board king. I mean, I will find you anything that you need. The only thing, a board with stickers for. Gotcha. Unfortunately, Yanni, there is no company that does that yet. The best thing that I would suggest is I forget what company does it, but they do the cut. They have the ones you can order for NFL, but you can also order just the board and the pieces themselves, and you can write the names on them.
I'm blanking on the name right now, but tell him to reach out to @JohnMcGlynn75 on Twitter. John's one of my guys I do a podcast with on Fantasy Frames. He's ordered a couple draft boards like that they made for him, and they're awesome. So if you're looking at ordering a draft board, I don't know if they can get you the college stickers with the names on them, but they can definitely get you a cool draft board. So get on Twitter and send a message to @JohnMcGlynn75. He will hook you up with the guys he's used in the past. He has a pretty sweet one that has Josh Allen and somebody else on the board. That's pretty cool. He uses for a lot of our home leagues.
Yeah, very nice. And Ben asks, Jared, how about a Power 4 only one? Again, Ben, go check out, I think it's number 3 for this year. I did the live stream. It's got a red thumbnail with Luther Burden on the front. And I did it with Chris Battisell earlier this year where we did a Power 4 only draft there. So you can take a look at that stream. You can see the full draft board there. If you want to, Ben, you can DM me on Twitter and I can send you a screenshot of the full draft board there as well. Alex Adams comes off the board here at 17-7, and it reminds me I never answered Mitch's question on that front because that happened right when you got cut off, or when your phone died there, JT, so I got distracted there. So, Mitch, you asked about Akron earlier and the possibility of Alex Adams's resurgence. And I think Alex Adams will be fine this year. But again, we can't ignore the fact that he is coming back from an injury. And the buzz has been really with wide receiver Adrian Norton. That's the name that kind of keeps coming up in report after report for the Zips. And so I have no problem if somebody wants to take a shot on Alex Adams being healthy again this year, hopefully having some improved quarterback play here with Ben Finley coming into town. But for right now, I would almost certainly be okay with taking, or like I'd be okay with anybody who wants to take the shot on Alex Adams being the number 1 wide receiver. But Norton, I think, is the one that could potentially explode this year. So let's see. It's coming back to my turn here. I got 3 guys here, and I only got 2 picks. What to do? I mean, shoot, I can't ignore it any longer. Give me Miller Moss. What the hell are we doing here, people? What the hell are we doing?
I was just thinking, if you don't take Moss, if he comes back to me, I got to go at him.
Like, again, is there a legit reason to think Maeva could overtake that job? Sure. Moss is my 5th quarterback off the board here. Like, if I wasn't so big... If I wasn't so big on taking running back on my last 2 picks there, I would have taken Moss in the last turn as well. It's getting ridiculous how much people are letting him fall. This is still likely quarterback 1 for Lincoln Riley offense. So
yeah, I like it. At this point, you just got to go value.
And I thought I was going to take the other quarterback here that I'm looking at. I might let you have him, JT, because you know exactly who I'm talking about here. But there's a wide receiver kind of staring at me on the board here, and I haven't taken a wide receiver since the 9th round, so I probably need to take a shot here. And I'll go with Daniel Jackson out of Minnesota. People forget that PJ Fleck, when he has a legit quarterback, produces fantasy wide receiver. Remember back
I've
to
got
the
a little PJ Fleck story for you. I'll throw out real quick. My senior year of high school, we played against PJ Fleck's team in the playoffs. Illinois high school football playoffs. They beat us at home. They won Maple Park Canelan is where he went to high school. They won back-to-back undefeated seasons. They knocked us out of the playoffs, and PJ Fleck won back-to-back high school titles. That's my PJ Fleck story. Him and his team beating me and my team in the playoffs in high school. So that's my PJ Fleck story.
Nice. I love it. I love those stories like that. But yeah, with Daniel Jackson, right? Dude had almost 100 targets last year with piss poor quarterback play with Ethan Kaliak-Manis, who has somehow duped the Rutgers Scarlet Knights into believing he can be a legit quarterback for them. They bring in Max Brosner. I'm hoping that means a better passing game over there. And if that happens, Daniel Jackson should be a monster for college fantasy. Had over 100 targets. Excuse me, Brett. I couldn't remember if he was on the smaller side of 100 or right above 100. So Will Howard was the other guy I was considering there. I thought about just making him my 6th quarterback and just not worrying about quarterback the rest of the draft, but I feel like there's guys on the board here still that like I'll be happy with as my 6th quarterback. So I felt like I could afford to pass that up. I think I'm probably gonna hit the position groups here pretty hard over the next couple of drafts or a couple of rounds. What about you, JT? How are you kind of feeling about your team so far?
I'm looking right now. I'm a little shy on RB as I just looked at my roster to kind of figure out where I'm at. I've got a couple guys I'm looking at, and I'm trying to decide if I want to even go more all in on certain teams or whether I want to spread it out just a hair here. I'll say, even though we got a couple guys here to come, even in case they steal my guy. I do like Hayden coming over from Ohio State to Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
I think he ends up being the guy there at running back. Like I said, if somebody steals my guy in the next couple picks, I won't be too upset about it. There's a few guys I like. Ruben Owens, Texas A&M. Thomas from UNLV. I like what he showed last year, a younger guy. And another guy that I kind of like is Eli Young, old Mizzou guy, now at Western Kentucky. Kind of got some run near the end of the year last year. He's got some nice receiving game. I think he could fit into that offense pretty well. So he's a guy that I'm super intrigued by the way that offense works. I think he could actually work in and get quite a few receptions on that team. So he's a guy I kind of want to take here. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm gonna take the chance on him. I know it's a guy that not a lot of people know about, but I really liked him at Mizzou. He kind of just got beat out by them getting guys. He transferred to Western Kentucky. He's a guy I could easily see in the higher end of running back receptions for college this year. I just think they could get him the ball a lot. He's athletic. Lewis Brown is the guy I really wanted, but he went in the last round before I took Velling. We talked about him a little bit from San Diego State. Oh, another San Diego State guy going there, McMillan. I love that.
That's a placeholder for Marquez Cooper.
Oh, Marcus Cooper. Okay, yeah. There, I was gonna say. Wait, I was like, wait, hold on. Who are we talking about here? So, but yeah,
I was like, wait. I was like, started praising the pick before you actually.
Wait, I'm like, that's not the guy I thought it was. So yeah, but Young, like I said, he's a guy. I'm willing to take a few more chances in best ball leagues, and that I think guys are gonna hit. That I probably wouldn't take in other formats. I tend to kind of go all or nothing in best ball leagues. That's just more my draft style for that type of league. So I like Eli Young. I think he ends up having a big year at Western Kentucky. He's, like I said, I want a piece of that offense. I'm not sure who I want, and him having the Mizzou ties kind of makes me want to take him. So that's what I did.
All righty. Great pick there from Dylan Reynolds on Katron Allen. I literally just added him to my queue as somebody I was potentially going to look at.
I put him in my queue too. He was one of the running backs I was considering in this round when I took Young.
All right. Jeremiah Love, I know somebody in the chat recently was talking about how he should be taken here soon. And Katron Allen is somebody I talk about a little bit on tomorrow's episode of CT. And actually, I talk about Nicholas Singleton and how I think that he's being taken way too high compared to where Katron Allen is going. Because, again, Mitch makes a prediction in the chat saying Katron will outscore Nicholas Singleton. He did it last year. Katron Allen outscored him last year. It's just that Nicholas Singleton had 2 more touchdowns than him. I really, really think that people have to be careful about assuming bounce back season for Nicholas Singleton. And this is coming from a guy that I drafted Nicholas Singleton as my 101 in a freshman supplemental draft over Luther Burden. Boy, do I regret that pick. Because again, I thought he was the next, I thought we were looking at the next Saquon Barkley. And well, he has not been that. He really struggled last year. And I'm really concerned that he will continue to struggle again this year. And so I'm honestly a big fan of the difference between Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton's value right now. I'll take Katron Allen 10 out of 10 times over him. Love the AJ Duffy pick there, JT. Everybody else is taking shots on the different pieces. You're taking the shot on the guy that'll probably be commanding the whole thing.
And my thing about him, a good, talented guy, went to Florida State, didn't win the job there. He's from California. I just think that's a great mix with him. I like him with Lewis. I think that they've kind of been a grounded pound team for the last decade because they didn't have a coach like Lewis. I think Lewis is going to open things up at San Diego State. Like I said, I love Lewis Brown, the pick couple picks before. I really wanted to stack those two guys, but I think Duffy has a chance to be kind of special there. And I just love the fact that Lewis is the head coach. So that pushes them up my my list of draft picks.
Are you concerned at all about the freshman, Danny O'Neal? There's been talk in some reports that it's clearly Duffy and O'Neal as the top two guys competing for this job. And to me, again, I still think Duffy's your guy, but I think you're looking at a situation where if he's being pushed by a true freshman, like I think that is a little cause for some concern there. And this is coming from a guy, I've been pushing Duffy all offseason, but I can't deny the reports that O'Neal looks pretty dang good.
Yeah, O'Neal, I saw you post something about him, and I had seen him on my radar with some of the San Diego State groups that I follow. It is interesting. If I'm in a dynasty league and I have Duffy, I think I want to grab O'Neal too. I want to make sure I have both of them just in case, because you just never know there. I mean, I just look at the situation where at Missouri, everybody's talking about Horn really pushing the higher end recruit, really pushing Brady Cook. And then Cook kind of just absolutely took over and took that role. So I think the hype's there from O'Neal, but I do think there's a situation where it ends up that similar way where Duffy ends up winning the job and then kind of really separating himself. Mm-hmm. But I'm definitely monitoring the situation because I think O'Neal's talented enough that he could actually there is a chance he gets that job. I think Duffy wins it, but you got to hope he plays well enough that he doesn't end up losing it at some point.
All right, I'm taking one of my guys here, Damian Taylor, a guy I think has been going too late in drafts, and now I got a couple of receivers here that I'm really kind of struggling to pick between. Do I play the ADP game on these three guys? No, they're all... One guy I definitely think could make it further down. Do I go with the guy that I think is going to be more explosive? Or do I go with the guy that I think is going to get more targets? Look at the other wide receivers I have here. I've been hitting targets pretty hard. I'll go with the explosive guy. Give me Kelly Akari, Mississippi State. Give me a piece of that Jeff Levy offense. Cooper Woods in the chat says, thoughts on the difference in strategy in best ball versus starting lineup leagues? JT, I'll throw this one over to you first, man. Like, best balls versus starting lineup leagues in college fantasy. One, I guess, is it different than when you're on NFL best ball? And then two, like, when you're considering it for college, like, what's the difference between the two for you?
Yeah, so for me, the best ball, like I said a little bit earlier, kind of mentioned, I'm willing to take more risks in best ball, knowing that I don't have to necessarily make the right pick every week. So I'm willing to take maybe those guys that have tough schedules, but they're going to have some monster weeks. I'm willing to lean a little heavier on those guys where in lineup leagues, I want the consistency guy that I know I'm going to be there. Maybe he's not going to get me the 175-yard, 2-touchdown game, but he's going to get me that 85 to 100 most weeks and maybe a touchdown. So for me, best ball, especially college, I really love the stacks, especially good offenses when I can get that QB wide receiver stack on a good offense. And I'm willing to take more shots on home run guys at the college side in best ball compared to lineup. Where lineup, I look at those guys and I probably am sitting them most weeks, and the only times I'm playing them is when I look at the matchup, and it's like, okay, this team is absolutely horrid against the pass. So I'm going to play this guy over a guy that I usually would start, and I'm playing the matchup game. That's kind of how I look up with college fantasy football. I'll look at the matchup game and lineups, where best ball, again, you don't have to pick them. So I'm just going for my home run hitters. I want to get the guys that I think can have huge games. And maybe you look at the end of the year and they finish this wide receiver 45 or 48, but they won me 3 weeks because all the production was in 3 weeks. So that's kind of where I look at it a little bit differently as far as lineup versus best ball, especially for college.
While you make your pick here, JT, I'm gonna give shout outs to these 3 receiver picks in a row here that I like quite a bit. One, Winston Wright Jr. Don, you planted your flag there in the chat. I'm planting with you, man. I'd rather have Winston Wright than Chase Sewell. Love the word I've been getting out of East Carolina. Again, his injury wasn't great during his time at Florida State. I really think that he's kind of found himself a nice place to come down to in the G5 level. Dadgummit, Carp, I was really hoping to get Shapen as a stack with Akari there. Regardless. So yeah, I'm with you on Winston Wright. Love him here in the 20th round. Kenneth Womack, for a guy that got 100 targets last year, he consistently goes past round 20. And I get it, right? His yards per target is atrocious. His ADOT is awful. Efficiency is not his game. Here's the thing though. What if it suddenly does? What if he just does become a better receiver all of a sudden? And the reason why they keep targeting him is because they know he can do it. And a light bulb goes off this year, and suddenly Womack is a locked-in 100-target guy in the MAC that can produce for you. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think it's worth it in round 20 just to see what happens. And then Xavier Thomas, I've loved this dude since he was at Mississippi State. Dynamic player. I think he's a better pick than CJ Daniels at LSU. I think that, again, he's been at the Power 4 level. It seems like he's fitting in a little bit more at LSU. I like it quite a bit. You took my boy Dom Lovett there, 20th round. What do you think about him?
I love Dominic Lovett. When he was at Mizzou as sophomore, with Brady Cook kind of trying to figure it out, I think it was 85% of the season, he was leading the SEC in receiving, which was pretty wild on a Missouri team that wasn't throwing the ball a lot.
Yep. And
Luther Burden was a true freshman just trying to work his way in. I think Lovett's highly underrated. He was, it was hurtful for Mizzou fans when he left us to go to Georgia because they thought, hey, we got the best 1-2 punch in the country with Lovett and Burden, and then Lovett takes off. I think this is his breakout year for Georgia. I mean, he really solid, very solid freshman year in Missouri, a great sophomore year. I think he was just kind of lost in the mix of all the players they had at Georgia with the running game. I think there's a very, very good chance he ends up being Carson Beck's number 1 this year. So I'm liking Lovett, especially where he's dropping in drafts. I just think he's worth a shot, especially in best ball.
I'm telling you right now, he will be the number 1 target for Carson Beck. He is the best receiver that Georgia has this year. And again, we talk about all the time, like vacated targets. Well, specifically on Georgia, without Bowers there, a lot of vacated targets over the middle. And normally when Carson Beck's looking over the middle, which is, by the way, his strongest point in his passing game, he's not going to see Bowers there anymore. So who's going to go to? He's going to go to Lovett. Lovett's a great option as well. It's just when you're looking at Lovett versus Bowers, right, you're going to go, okay, I'll just throw to Bowers. He's bigger, faster. I'll go with that. But versus Lovett, I'm not calling 1,000-yard wide receiver for Georgia. I know that's crazy talk, but he's gonna I think having us questioning it at some point this season of like, can he actually hit 1,000 yards for Georgia this year? So
I have him with a couple C2C leagues that I'm gonna definitely play him on a regular basis in a lineup league. But I love him in best ball. He's gonna have some big time games.
I mean, he had over 100 yards in the spring game, and Kirby never lets his big time players, skill players, have massive spring game performances for the most part. So the fact that like Lovett got his work there, I think, is a bit of a sign to come. Now, I'm not expecting a 100-yard performance every single week. I'm not going crazy here, but I just think there's good signs.
I think he's a value because people just kind of forget about who he was because he wasn't super involved last year with that team. I mean, like I said, he was a sophomore leading the SEC in receiving almost the entire year on a team that didn't throw the ball a lot. A team that wanted to run in Missouri. So he's got the talent. I just think he ends up their number 1, and I love him in best ball because I think he's going to have some monster games. I don't know what's going to be every week. I definitely think he's going to have some 2 for 10 weeks mixed in there, but I think he's going to have some big weeks.
I agree 100%. We saw it a little bit last year when Bowers went down. Like who became the number 1 target? It was Lovett. And then Bowers came back, Lovett faded again. And so we'll see how that looks in a season-long format here. Mitch asks, if mobile quarterbacks are important, why isn't Bert Emanuel being selected? That is because he may not win that job. Straight up. That's the issue there.
Not Emanuel, but I'm only taking him late because 100, like you said, there's no guarantee he wins that job. I like him. I have him on quite a few teams. If I'm in a new startup, he's the guy I'm just waiting on because I do not want to take him early and go, well, that was a wasted pick if he loses the job. So the alternate to Emmanuel, and I just took him in this last round, is Dampier for New Mexico. I don't have a lot of dual threat guys. He is a dual threat guy. I think he's a good chance. They got a new head coach there in New Mexico. I think he's a guy that ends up being featured. He's the guy that's going to struggle big time some weeks, but I think he's going to have some massive weeks against some bad teams. So I like him in these kind of formats because of the rushing upside and because of the fact that my quarterback room right now doesn't have a lot of rushing upside. I felt like I needed to get one of those guys at some point here in the draft, so that's why I went with him.
Yep, I fully like that pick a lot. And also, again, Bronco Mendenhall. Bronco Mendenhall is the kind of the big name there, right? We know what he can do with dual threat quarterbacks.
He's a college fantasy production. I mean, he has really had some great guys over the years. I think Bronco is a monster upgrade at coach. I mean, I think it's, you can't speak enough to what an upgrade he is as a head coach. Even as he's getting older, the guy knows what he's doing. He knows how to coach. He's coached in the Mountain West before, which I think is a huge upside for him. And they've gotten some players going to New Mexico the last couple of years. So I'm sneakily watching that team that I think they're going to be much improved on offense.
Mitch, I know for a fact you're listening in the chat right now. You are the person who introduced me to the phrase big fish, small pond. We say it all the time for players, right? Again, especially guys coming from the Power 5 or even like highly rated guys going to smaller schools. I'll ask you, Mitch, is this something that can apply to coaches as well? Because I think I mentioned this on the pod recently where, like, JT, you answered me this, like, how many Power 4 teams would have taken Bronco Mendenhall as their head coach this past coaching cycle if they knew that he was on the docket, if they knew that he was available to be brought in, right? Because that took me by surprise when he got brought to New Mexico. I imagine there's other athletic departments that were kind of shocked of like, wait, that was an option?
I think there was a lot of people would have taken him. I agree. I think there's a lot of coaches if they would have known that he was an option, they might have reconsidered their coaching, what they were doing with their coaches beforehand. A guy like that, he knows how to coach. You get to those big levels, it's like, it's not that they forget how to coach. It's just so much more difficult to win, especially depending on what program you end up at. But I think you see at the smaller levels, coaching can make all the difference in the world on some of these teams.
No, totally understandable. A fun question here from Jamie asking, he's doing his first CFF Dynasty draft, which claps to you, Jamie. Those are not easy drafts there. He says, do we take a little bit of both when it comes to like seniors and juniors versus sophomores? Thoughts in general? Like, I guess how do you balance out your team in a CFF Dynasty draft? I don't really have a great answer for this. The only thing I can really tell you is just kind of the way my CFF Dynasty rankings are kind of broken down is that I almost start with two different tiers between old guys with like 1 to 2 years left that could potentially go off to the NFL and guys that I know for a fact will be here for two plus years. And then I almost tier list those two different lists, right? And so it basically becomes my tier 1 for guys that I know will be producing in college for 2+ years becomes the top of my rankings for quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, whatever. And then after that, the tier 1 of my, juniors and sophomores, guys that probably only have 1 year left, they become that second. They become that second tier of the combined list right there, right? And so I would say when it comes to those drafts, again, putting time and effort into building out those rankings ahead of time will help you so much. One, it'll keep you from forgetting about different players and stuff like that. but it'll also kind of provide you almost two different lists of, all right, I feel good about this side of my roster of young guys. Let me go grab some veteran guys. Let me see what's kind of left on that front. So I hope that makes sense. Justin, you're killing me, man. I really hope to get Dylan Goffney there, but I shouldn't have mentioned his name. JT, you took two wide receivers here. You took an Illinois wide receiver that's not Zachary Franklin, man. We were just talking about how hyped that was.
I know I like Franklin. I think he's dropping because people are forgetting about him. I do really like what Pat Bryant has done. He was really solid opposite Isaiah Williams last year in a team that was just kind of figuring out to pass the ball. I do think Bryant has a shot to get a lot of targets depending on how Franklin fits in. I like both those guys. I still like Franklin. I just think a lot of people have forgotten about him, so I always think I can get him later. So that's why I jump on Pat Bryant first, and I usually take on Franklin later only because people have forgotten about him. If it was last year, it would be completely reversed. But he's fallen in drafts. I think guys forget he's even there. So I tend Bryant first and then Franklin later, to be honest with you.
Nope, totally. I totally understand that. What about Theo Weiss there, man? Again, you were talking about the kind of double receiver between Lovett and Burden. Weiss didn't perform great last year, but you expecting bigger things from him this year?
I expected a bigger year from him. He came back. I think he's real dedicated to the team this year. People forget he came over Oklahoma, so he was a transfer. So he didn't start his career there, so he was kind of trying to figure out how he fit. And then I think Burden kind of took the reins last year, and he wasn't ready for that. I think he's going to be more prepared this year. I think he's going to know where he kind of fits in the system. And I just think this team, with Brady Cook, with the experience, they're going to throw more. I mean, last year they were run Cody Schrader as much as they can.
Especially second
still
half.
think they're going to run the ball, but I think it's going to be a lot more even. So I think Burden's going to get a ton of attention. I think it's going to open up Weiss. Best ball, I really like him because, again, he's one of those guys I think is going to have some monster games. He might not be the consistent week-to-week guy, but I love the fact that I think he's going to have some pretty big games when teams put all their resources into stopping Burden.
All right, I'm kind of getting excited about some of the wide receiver picks I kind of have lined up here. We'll see if Costin and Joe will let me have some of these guys here. Because I still need 4 wide receivers, so I'm probably going to hit that position pretty hard over the next couple of rounds here. I do also probably need to take a look at tight end here because we are starting to dry up a little bit. No, there's still some guys that I like here. I'll probably be okay there. As I say that, more and more tight ends coming off the board. I am going to take a couple of post-hype sleepers here at receiver. This is going to be fun. I'm going to take Antonio Williams, wide receiver out of Clemson.
Like it.
And then once it gets back around to Joe, I'm going to ask you a question, JT. See if you know this answer off the top of your head. But we'll get around to that. I am putting you on the spot.
I usually know trivia pretty well, but every once in a while I fall apart. So we'll try to get it here.
Again, this is an offense. This is a G5 offense that people typically like, and I know Ryan asked me earlier here. What are some systems you're willing to take late shots on? Well, if you believe this quarterback, or not this quarterback, the quarterback was taken rounds ago. If you believe that offense is going to jump this year, for that quarterback to be taking where he is right now, he's going to need a receiver. So, JT, I'll ask you real quick. Who was the number 1 target for Arkansas State last year?
Oh, you got me on that one. Oh, I know their QB. I'm trying to think who their receiver was. You got me. I don't know it unless I look it up.
If I thought to myself, I would say Courtney Jackson. That's not the answer. Corey Rucker. Bounce back season's coming, man.
No way I would have got that.
Corey Rucker's coming back, man. 82 targets last season. Yeah, he didn't get a single touchdown to the bowl game. That sucks. He had a major drop issue at times last year. I'm willing to take the shot here. I'm willing to bet on a bounce back season for Rucker here. I think he can hit 100 targets this year. I'm hoping he stops dropping crap in the end zone. Because let's see, yeah, like according to PFF, and not that they have the greatest drop stat in the world, he had 8 drops last year. And his drop grade was a 38.5. So rough season for Rucker there. I think he bounces back. And again, he averaged almost 19 yards or over 19 yards per catch last year. Dude was explosive. He just couldn't find the end zone. It was driving me nuts.
Yeah, and that's one of those things, like, you got to figure that's going to change eventually. You know, those touchdown stats are always the toughest ones to kind of predict.
No, absolutely, for sure. And again, somebody asked about like tight ends earlier. Are you chasing touchdowns? Are you chasing targets? I'm still chasing targets at tight end, mostly because touchdowns are just hard to predict. As much as you can look at touchdown rate and stuff like that for different systems and stuff like that, a lot of that is so player dependent, right? Different guys are just different. Like Brock Bowers, part of the reason why he was so great was because he was freaking incredible in the red zone last year. So you are screaming at the sky there.
I was taking Reuben Owens from Texas A&M. I had my thumb over the button, and Goose stole him right in front of me. Very nice pick. I like that. I'm going to go Thomas, UNLV. I do think they're going to run it off. I like what I saw in them last year. Just from Barry Odom's time at Missouri, I know they're going to get White the ball, but I know they want to run the football. So I like Thomas. I think he still ends up being the guy there. And I like him this late at 24th round. I'm willing to take a shot on him because I think that offense, I just like what they have there at UNLV.
No, and I totally understand that. My concern is I still think, despite the fact that Jaden Thomas looked great as a true freshman last year, they're still going to want to run a committee. They seem pretty dead set on it based on like interviews and stuff like that. And it was very disappointing to hear because I actually went and grabbed Jaden Thomas in a couple of dynasty leagues last year with the expressed hope of, hey, I know they typically do committee, but when you have a guy that's this good as a true freshman, right? You give him, 11 touchdowns last year? I can't remember if it was 10 or 11 touchdowns last year. That tells me that you expect great things for him down the line, and it doesn't sound like he's going to make that jump this year. In fact, he might still be RB2 behind Michael Allen. So 12 touchdowns. Thank you, Brett. Even more so. Like, you give him 12 touchdowns last year, which way overperforms what he should have gotten given his production. But even so, my hands are in the air. I've kind of given up on hoping that staff at UNLV will go with a workhorse back, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I like him a little bit more in best ball just because of that. But, a little less than the fact that he has a big game, they keep him in there. But yes, you are correct. That is a little bit an iffy pick on whether he ends up becoming the guy, which is why I really wanted Owens there. I'm looking here. There's a ton of wideouts I want. I kind of feel like I need another running back. So I'm kind of like looking down the list, trying to figure out who I like. I wasn't going to go with him here, but I am because I like the talent. I know it's another Colorado guy, which is going to get a boo from you, but I do like Hayden. I think he ends up being the number one running back for Colorado. I just like him and the talent. And like I said, I think this team is going to give up a crap load of points, and so they're going to have to score. And I like what Edwards did as a freshman, and then obviously he transferred. So I think that Hayden's a more complete back than Edwards. So I like the fact that he could probably put up some pretty solid games for them. Is it going to be every week? No, because there are going to be weeks where they're getting crushed and they don't run the ball at all, and they throw the ball every play, and he's out of it. But I do think they're going to try to get him involved as much as they can in games that are close.
Again, I like Hayden as a talent, so I'm not going to knock you too much there. I think, as Austin Nace put it best, in that if you're a prospect for the NFL and you're considering Colorado as your transfer destination, you are not a serious prospect at this point. And I think that applies to Hayden there, but we'll see. Couple of interesting guys here off the board. Again, Roydell Williams out of Florida State. I think it's a good one. Let's see. Savion Williams, interesting there at TCU. Trayvon Rudolph at 25-2 there from Justin Nottingham. He was another one of the guys that, like, when I was looking at Antonio Williams and Corey Rucker, I had in my head the theme of post-hype sleepers. He was on my list there as well. I was kind of seeing if I can maybe get him here in the 25th round, but was not meant to be. Justin was apparently spying on my queue when he looked at that. But yeah, Saban Williams is an interesting one there because again, Sonny Dykes for the most part has really spread his wide receivers around last couple of years outside of really Quentin Johnson. And he was obviously a first round pick in the NFL eventually, and he's still not doing great in the NFL, but that's besides the point. I just think that TCU still doesn't really have that star at receiver right now. But again, another situation where maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. All right. Let me grab another wide receiver here. Let me go Dalen Cobb. I'll pair him up with Durham Burgess, who I took earlier in the draft. I'll just take 2 shots at that Georgia Southern wide receiver room. We know for a fact that there's going to be somebody who gets 100 targets out of that room. And it's either going to be Cobb, who's replacing Caleb Hood on the outside there, or it's going to be Durham Burgess. All right, bringing it back to me. I'll go ahead and take my third tight end here. I'll take Max Clare, tight end out of Purdue. Got injured last year, but before he was injured, averaged 5 targets per game as a tight end through his first 5 games. That's pretty impressive there. And we have seen over the last couple of years that Purdue has provided us some pretty solid tight ends. Great pick, by the way, Joe, there with Jamison Tucker. Love that pick. But yeah, Max Clare here, a guy averaging 5 targets before he went down last year. I'll take the shot. JT, you seem very deep in thought. What you thinking about, man?
Well, I was looking, and I probably shouldn't say this because picks are coming up in front of you. But I was going to ask you, and I've noticed this the last couple times I've looked on Fantrax. Is Marquez Cooper just not on Fantrax?
Yeah, he's not. There's some issues there.
Because he's a guy I like. We're getting kind of deep in the running backs where how many guys are going to be relevant. I don't know.
Cooper's placeholder was already taken, so
what? Okay, that's what I was looking at. I was like, was he already taken as a placeholder? Because I was like, he's on the list. I was like, I couldn't remember if he already got taken because I like him here. I'm doing a deep dive into the running backs because I need a few more. Mm-hmm. I don't love the value, honestly. So I'm like trying to decide, do I take one and reach, or do I go better value and take guys I think are better wide receivers, even though I'm pretty deep at wide receiver and shallow at running back. So that's my deep thought right now as I'm kind of deciding what route to go there, or do I want to take a running back that I think if an injury happens that guy could have a big year. That's kind of my other thought.
I mean, nuclear option is a very, very real strategy at this point. And Mitch dropping a couple names there in the chat. Cam Edwards, Braden Sloan at Ball State. Again, Sloan, it's not really confirmed that he'll be the running back 1 there for Ball State. Jamie M says Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt is not in the player pool as well. This is something I will be talking to Fantrax about next week when I go to the Fantasy Football Expo. I will be talking to them.
If you see anybody that's not there, feel free to send it to me, and I'll put it in the support system at Fantrax, as I do.
Okay, cool.
I do work at Fantrax. I actually helped them. Well, there was a couple weeks ago. We still had some quarterbacks that were no longer eligible for college in the list. I was like, oh, I saw those in somebody's poll, and I was like, whoa, let's get those out of here. So I sent them a message. I was like, hey, these guys need to be deleted from the system. So they got that cleared up. So you see people, let me know.
I can think of 3 names off the top of my head right now. Chandler Morris, quarterback at North Texas, not in the player pool for some reason.
Yep.
Marquez Cooper, running back out of San Diego State, not in the pool for some reason. And then Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, running back out of Arizona, not in the pool for some reason. And then there's a couple of players with some teams that are incorrect as well. I know Jackson Warren, and I kind of understand it a little bit because Jackson Warren was committed to Ball State, and then he got out of his national letter of intent, and so he's now at Colorado State, so it still shows Ball State for him. And then there's some other ones. I'll probably look through this draft.
Still on there for Ohio State, even though he's actually I don't know. So there's a couple of those. So yeah, I usually try not to inundate them with stuff, but I try to send them about once a week when I notice guys after I've done a draft and send them an update with those guys. So I jumped in last second here. I just took Jimmy Horn again. At this point in this draft, I'm going all in on Colorado to my great surprise or my detriment at this point. If they fall apart and are terrible, my team's going to be awful. But at this point, I was like, all right, I'm going to take Jimmy Horn, another guy who was really solid last year and has a chance to have some huge games. Because again, I think best ball, I want a lot of Colorado guys. in starting lineup league, I'm not sure I want a lot of them because I'm not sure who's going to be good week to week, and especially they could crush you in some weeks. There's my guy, Franklin, going off. Dar003, great pick. Taking Franklin there. Still says Ole Miss, but now at Illinois.
I have a name that I've added to my queue. We'll see if I can get him as my last pick. It's a quarterback. I'm sure people will start taking shots on different guys, but it's somebody I took in a recent underdog draft that I actually think is a little bit undervalued right now. So we'll see what we can get there.
I took a pick. This is my backup in case a guy if Darius Taylor gets hurt at Minnesota again. I think Bangura could be a super important guy.
No, good insurance policy
at Minnesota. So I'm taking him here at the 27th round. Best ball, I love it because, hey, if he ends up not getting in or Darius Taylor stays healthy and is the stud everybody thinks he's going to be, then
you're getting those points regardless.
But if Darius Taylor gets hurt, I just got to steal in the 27th round if he plays a lot of weeks.
No, I agree. Mitch saying nice value with Chris Hudson there. I can tell you exactly why Chris Hudson fell further in this draft than he normally does. Again, there was a I can't remember if it was an article or just a depth chart released recently that had Chris Hudson on the second team at slot, not like behind Josh Meredith, but behind Josh Meredith and Tony Freeman, I believe, is the other slot wide receiver that they had ahead of them. So we'll see if that situation remedies itself, but we'll definitely see. Todd Skid says Michael Harrison needs to be added. Yes, that's a good call. Stacey Gage. I don't know who Stacey Gage is, but all right. I think I'll hit. I still need a running back. I need one at each position. It looks like. So I think I'm gonna. Do I want to hit tight end here? Nah, there's other guys here that I kind of like. I'll just add a bunch to the queue, and whoever makes it back to me. Love the Alex Perry pick there, Joe. I think I'll take wide receiver here. I'll take Mac Delana, who it appears is now playing in the slot for Fresno State, which is sad for all of us because we thought Jalen Moss was going to get that. But you know what? System play here. I'll take Mac Delana. He's a veteran in this program. I'll take the shot there. And then
ask you real quick because I was on the road and a little late jumping in. Oh, I love the Norfleet. That's a sneaky good pick in best ball there, tight end out of Missouri. I'll ask you as soon as you make your pick here. My question.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and take. This is semi-homer pick again. I just like this team. Good luck in the FBS this year. I'll take Michael Benefield, running back out of Kennesaw State there.
Nice.
Go Owls, hooty hoot.
Do a little pre-show talk because I was on the road and got set up just a hair late. Is there minimums we have to have at any position? Because we didn't get to talk about it. So I'm kind of looking through what I've got here.
No, you don't need no actual minimums. I just prefer 6 quarterback, 10 running back, 10 wide receiver, 4 tight ends is what I typically go for.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing out anything. I was in that mix. I'm pretty even on my lineup right now, but I was just looking to say, make sure it wasn't something I had to do.
All right. Mitch asks Conley over Merritt. I personally am staying away from Arizona's backfield at the moment, but I think Taylor there took Conley just because of auto drafting. I think he's just on auto draft the rest of the draft. So we'll see. I don't think he had a particular reason for that. Yeah, Cross is an interesting one there at Arkansas State. Again, they typically go committee, but we'll see. Baugh's an interesting one with Montrell Johnson. Mitch, I have to ask you, Mitch in the chat there, you were poo-pooing everybody buying into the Tet McMillan injury hype, but you seemed earlier to be in on the Montrell Johnson injury hype, even though they specifically said they don't expect Montrell Johnson to miss any time in the actual season. So I don't understand what the difference is there. You have to explain that one to me in the chat there, Mitch. But JT, you're on the clock here in 28th round. What are you thinking, man?
So we talked about him earlier, and so I'm going to take a swing because, like I said, I'm a little shallow on running back, and I've kind of played this that I'm taking home run guys that might not be great every week picks, but could be big. I'm actually going to go with our guy Paul at Jacksonville State.
Okay.
I know it's a reach. I know it's a chance that maybe he doesn't get in the system, play right away, but I'm going to take a chance on him here that he ends up winning the job at some point, and the fact that likely he's the best player on that team, that he ends up winning out. So I'm going to take a shot on him here in the 28th.
JT, I'm going to let you in on a little secret here real quick. This is a 28th round. There are no reaches at this point. I'm letting you know right now. Like, you don't have to call your picks a reach at this point.
I always feel for me, I'm one of those guys that like the late round picks more than most people. So the people are like, oh, it's like I'm one of those people. I actually get to the later rounds. There's more guys I like than in the middle rounds, just because in the middle rounds it's all about value. And then I'm like, get late. I'm like, well, I like this guy. Even I'm one of those guys that trades for like 5 rookie dynasty picks in the NFL. If you're like 5th rounders are worthless, I'm like, I love everyone in the 5th round. I'm just one of those guys. I'm always looking at the upside of players, and I always want to kind of get that gem if I can. So that's my mindset.
I definitely get it. Carp, love the Jadarian Price pick. That's my guy that we are. That's my guy that I'm taking shots on for Notre Dame. I'm not taking him in this draft, clearly, obviously, but I've taken him in plenty of other ones there. So I think he's the best true running back that Notre Dame has this year. So. Joseph, thanks for joining, man. Glad you enjoyed the stream. Wish you could stick around for the last couple of rounds, but I get it. It's getting late here. We're actually going pretty long. But I guess we just start a little bit late. That makes a bit of sense. So, yeah, we got 2 more rounds here. JT, with your last 2 picks, what positions are you kind of looking for? Again, I've already kind of said that I'm going quarterback and tight end with my last 2 picks. What are you looking at?
I'm pretty even now. The one position I was hurting at was running back. I was a little short, so I was trying to add some running backs in there. I was looking at tight end. A lot of it's gotten eaten up here, but I do like the 3 guys I got in Jolly, Maryland, and Velling, so I feel pretty comfortable there. So now I'm kind of looking at value. I'm trying to see if somebody kind of slipped through the cracks. I do like my QBs, but I'm trying to decide if there's another QB I might want to grab. Couple wideouts I like. I just feel like wideouts pretty deep here. And this late in the draft, I kind of like, I want to kind of get the best value. Or guys I think that can hit or have big games. So I'm probably not going necessarily. Running back is probably where I should go, but I don't love a lot of options here with the last couple guys I took. So I'm probably going wide receiver, to be honest, just because there's a few guys out there kind of staring me at the face that I kind of like. So I'm going to take him just in case.
All righty, sounds good. We'll see what Carp lets you have here, man. Goose is asking about Michael Harrison. Let me ask him answer him in the chat here. Yeah, Fantrax goofed and took him out. Use a placeholder if you want him. And name the placeholder in the YouTube chat. All right, cool. I'm back. All right, Kobe Prentice, love the pick there.
So it goes.
Mitch is probably going to say you picked another wide receiver 3 here.
I know. I think we're just not sure what we're going to see out of Alabama. I think we're going to see. I mean, obviously they've had good quarterbacks and good wide receivers under Nick Saban, but I think Prentice is in a pretty wide open receiver room, and I like the fact that he's been there. Even though it's a new coaching staff, he kind of knows what's going on. I think he's worth a shot in a best ball. I've got him in plenty of other C2C leagues where I like him as well. I just think that room's going to be open, and I think that Alabama is really going to try to open it up like Washington did last year. So I want to get a couple guys at decent value for Alabama and hope that they hit. And so Kobe Prentice is a guy that's been on my list in a lot of leagues, just for the fact that I think he could end up having some pretty big games in that offense.
Wow. All righty. I got a lot. I like some of the picks that are taking shots at quarterback here over the last couple of picks here. I mean, Vandegrift, Ty Thompson.
I really do like Vandegrift. I like the transfer over. I think he is pretty talented. I think he's going to get a legit shot there at Kentucky. So he's a guy I've liked taking shots on late because I think there's a chance with the wide receiver talent they have that he could end up having a pretty good year statistically.
So I'm about to take a quarterback here that threw for 40 plus times in 7 of his games last year. He's a Big 12 quarterback. Who am I about to take?
Are you going to take Morton?
No.
Texas Tech?
That's a good guess, but I actually probably fits that criteria as well. But I trust I trust this guy actually a little bit more, surprisingly.
Big 12. Man, who else are you going for the Big 12? I was trying to look at Big 12 QBs that's still available.
I'm going Alan Bowman.
Bowman, the other guys, I was like, you going Bowman? Actually, after the rough start for him, he actually got a lot better.
He did. That's kind of the crazy thing.
You're like, oh, he's not as bad as we thought. I mean, he looked rough to start the year last year, but he was the other guy I was thinking him and Morton.
His big problem is that Ollie Gordon steals all the freaking touchdowns. Like, he had multiple games with 0 passing touchdowns, despite the fact that he threw over 40 times. Great pick with Humphreys there, by the way, Joe C. Well done there. I completely forgot about him. I should have taken him here at some point. I'm going to take my last tight end here. I'll take Kyle Morlock out of Florida State. DJU's got to throw to someone. Malik Benson looks pretty solid, but man, Kyle Morlock's his own demon as well. So I like Kyle Morlock as my 4th tight end there.
Since you're such a Georgia guy, I want to ask you about this. What do you think about the Georgia situation at tight end? They've got crap loads of talent, but who ends up being the guy? And is there a guy? I mean, nobody's Bowers, but is there a guy that can be productive there this year? And if so, who do you think it ends up being? Or do you think they just all steal touches from each other and no one really has a big receiving season as a tight end for Georgia?
I mean, I still think Delp is going to, like you said, nobody's going to be Bowers, but I'd still put the money on Delp. As much as people like Eurosec, and I do think he'll probably have the best hands out of that tight end room, Delp is going to be the one who gets the most snaps. And so I think if you're going to take a shot on him or a shot on one of them, it'll be Delp. But again, it's going to be Lovett who's going to be the primary receiver that if you're going to take a shot on any of those Georgia skill position players outside of ETN, I would absolutely say that it's going to be Lovett. If you have to pick a tight end, I'd pick Delp. I had Delp in my queue here in case somebody sniped me on Warlock, to give you an idea.
And that's why I'm asking you, because I had Delp is right here in my list. And I was trying to decide, do I go Delp or do I go another wide receiver spot? Delp was kind of the guy at the top of my list, and that's why I was asking you with your sec there. But I think it's worth, especially here in the best ball, with I have Lovett, I'm going to take the shot. Delp's the other guy, so I'm going to take him here in the 30th.
Yeah, because Eurosec came off the board here the 23rd. That gap in value doesn't make any sense to me. Eurosec
I love Delp in the 30th compared to him in the 23rd for sure. So that's why I was getting your opinion, because he was at the top of my queue, and I was like, oh, he'd be my 4th tight end. But I'm like, man, I really like that group of tight ends with him added in there. So that's what I was thinking.
Alrighty, and then Mitch, good call out with Ulysses Bentley here, pretty solid in the last round. I'm just concerned that Ole Miss is going to go committee with Rashad Amos and some of the other guys they got going on over there. Mitch, quiet. Delp's not going to be tight end 2 behind Eurosec. Eurosec literally just started practicing last week. All right, he's not going to take over as tight end 1 for Georgia.
Yeah, Eurosec. I'd rather have Eurosec in a Devy league. Because there's a thing, I think that an NFL team will take a chance on him no matter what his college production is. But I'm worried about his college production. He's not a guy I want early. I don't see him putting up big numbers for Georgia this year.
Alrighty, and we are finishing up here. Dylan's got the last pick. Who's going to be Mr. Irrelevant? Dylan, I know you're listening. It is Courtney Jackson. He took the other Arkansas State wide receiver. Again, not a bad system to just take shots on if you really believe in Jalen Raynor being that good for them this year. So, again, we're already pretty late here, JT, so we're not going to do the whole, all right, who are you surprised is still on the board kind of deal. I will ask you, looking at your roster and everything, how do you feel overall about your team?
I like my team, but I am definitely reliant on Ohio State and Colorado putting up some pretty big offensive numbers. Where I drafted those guys, if they don't, my team could definitely be in fairly big trouble. For that reason, like I said, I did kind of go more with the home run hitter mentality. In this, I took a lot of guys I thought had huge upside, but could have fairly decent bust potential week to week. So that's kind of where I'm at on this team. But if I can get some solid performance out of Ohio State and Colorado, I think I'm going to look pretty good. I really do like my tight end room. I think my probably weakest area of my team is the running back room. I'm going to need Judkins, Henderson, and Fegan to really show out. If they do not, my team could be in trouble just on the running back side of things.
I need to go and check my running backs for week 7 because I took Neal, Brooks, and Hughes to start. All 3 of them have week 7 bye. And so that's 3 of my top 4 running backs there that are all off on the same week. And so I need guys like Javon Jackson, Dylan Carson, either of the North Texas running backs that I took. Benefield's off on week 7 as well. So I need my running backs to show up that week. Otherwise, I could be falling behind there. But for the most part, again, it's a very different team I drafted today than I normally do. Again, a lot of guys that I typically have kind of let fall by in previous drafts. I kind of was a little bit more aggressive in getting guys like Rock Taylor, guys like Derwin Burgess. Again, Mario Anderson's been a guy that I haven't really been able to get a lot. Preston Stone. It feels nice to have a very different team. I wouldn't be surprised if this kind of ends up a middle of the pack team for me because especially at running back, right? Like there was such that large gap between when I took my top 4 guys and when I took the next tier of guys. Now, I like my next tier of guys, some sleepers that I like quite a bit, but if they don't pan out, man, I'm in trouble real quick. So,
yeah, I hear you. I mean, I took Judkins 2nd round, Henderson 4th round, Fegan 8th round. Then I did not take another running back until Eli Young in the 18th, and then all my other running backs 24th round later. So, like I said, I'm going to need some Fegan to really step up, and I'm going to need the Ohio State guys to show up a lot of weeks, or I could be in big trouble there.
And not to pick on you, JT, but like I mentioned at the very beginning of the stream, I talked about how running back for me, or maybe I didn't mention it on the stream, but in tomorrow's episode of the Running Back Crash Course, I kind of mentioned how even though this is a deeper year for running backs than I think we're typically used to in the CFF community, it still falls off after a while. And I think that you were a little bit of a victim of that drop-off here towards the end, right? Where you're going after guys like Thomas, Dallin, Sabangura, Andrew Paul. These are all guys that, if you're being honest with yourself, you're probably not expecting them to be out of the gate workhorse backs. You're kind of hoping something happens during the season. Either they earn more carries throughout the season, or somebody goes down in that backfield that kind of forces them to have more carries. And I think that can get you in a bit of trouble here. That can get you into a bit of trouble here if that's what you're kind of looking at for. Because again, you have how many running backs did you take? I see 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you have 8 running backs total. So yeah, half your running backs, you're kind of hoping for something good to happen.
Yeah, I'm praying on. You're right. I kind of missed that middle tier run. People kind of started grabbing guys. Like I told you, Waters went right before my pick. I wanted Waters, then I took Branch. And I had a couple other guys that were on my list coming back to me, and I missed them. And then I was like, oh, do I go a totally different direction? Instead of taking the next running back, I took another position. And so I had that big middle gap in my draft where I didn't take running backs. And then you're right, it fell off real quick. And by the time I realized, I looked at my RBs, I was like, oh, there's not a lot of good choices left here. I'm definitely going to be looking at some backups that need some help. So I agree with that assessment for sure.
Alrighty, well, it is getting late. JT, really appreciate you for coming on. All of you guys in the chat, appreciate you guys joining us. JT, before we get out of here, man, tell the people, what are you working on for fantasy content this year? I know you do a lot of work for Fantasy and Frames, Dynasty Pros, you do work for Fantrax, you mentioned earlier. What can people expect from you going into this season?
Yeah, so you can always find me helping out on Fantasy and Frames with a bunch of different shows. I do the Shoot the Gap. If you're into IDP, we do that every Wednesday night, late night, usually about 10:30 East Coast time. We do that one. I jump on a bunch of other shows. We have the Commission Evaluation podcast that me and John McGlynn do. I have my show, The Stew with JT Brew. Been a little light on that show lately because I've been on so many other shows. But if you like gambling content, especially college gambling content, I do a lot on my Stew with JT Brew page, which has moved to Fantasy and Frames. So check that out. We're probably going to be doing that on Tuesday nights, kind of get you set up for everything we like coming up for the for the college football betting week. And then from there, I write all kinds of rookie articles, a lot of draft articles for DLF, and I do IDP rankings for DLF as well. So if you're a member over there, and you play in IDP leagues, you can check out my top 150. And if you're getting ready to do a rookie draft, because you draft later in the year, I have my IDP rookie rankings up there as well. So that's kind of the main stuff I do. I do all kinds of college stuff, jump in on shows and help with other people and do college content as well, as I play in every type of league. There's not a league I don't play in. So I love it all. And as the college game is growing more in fantasy circles, I keep finding myself diving deeper into that, because that's my first love, is college football.
And you have embraced it with great enthusiasm. Things going on over here at Campus Canton and Chasing the Natty and everything. Again, keep on the lookout. We're continuing to put out our Crash Course series for all the different positions. It is, in my opinion, one of my favorite series I do every single year, because you just get so much information out of it, so much good discussion. In addition, check out again, we're not doing a live draft on this channel this weekend, because the biggest live draft of the offseason, the Kings Classic CFF Draft Stream, will be occurring this Saturday at 10 a.m. over on the Rookie Big Board channel. It'll be live from Canton, Ohio, from the Fantasy Football Expo. We'll be drafting from the draft room in the NFL Football Hall of Fame. It's going to be an absolute blast. There's going to be a ton of different fantasy experts on that stream, so mark your calendars for that. It's going to be an absolute ton of fun. JT, are you going to the expo this year?
I'm going to miss you guys this year. I was planning on going, but my son decided last second that he wanted to sign up for tackle football, and tackle football is 2 months earlier than flag football. So I'm a coach on the team. We have our first game of the season here on Saturday, so I'm going to miss out this year. I regret it. I wanted to go really bad, but I'm the assistant head coach and defensive coordinator, so couldn't miss the first game of the year. So I've got to skip this year. Hopefully going to make it back there again next year.
Well, best of luck to you guys on your game this weekend. With all that being said, JT, man, really appreciate you for coming on. Everybody in the chat, if you have not already, leave the like. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not for any reason whatsoever. Otherwise, appreciate you guys joining us here on a Sunday night. It's been an absolute blast, and I hope see you guys sometime soon. Until then, appreciate y'all, and have a blessed week.